уперлася москальня, казавши на парад Київ іде, любим сусідам руський мір принесе. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Десь у полях, танки ворожі шукав собі шлях, а фермери українські ті танки знайшли і собі на тракторі додому потягли. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Україна засіває в землю руські добрива. Каже Пісков, що потерь у нас нет, з неба летить вам Байрактара привет. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Україна стала до бою і міцна, як стіна. Б'є ЗСУ, артилерія б'є, жоден москаль у наш дім не зайде. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир. Нет, Владимир, нет, Владимир, брешеш ти усьому світу, що ти за мир.
На коліно своє полкове знамено, дивлюсь на нього я востаннє у нез'ясованій журбі. Всю кров мою, всі скитання воно вібрало у собі. Всю кров
Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великой страны.
Найкращий пастух баранячий хотар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Хто води всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить. Хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар? Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ. Тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Hello, everyone. I am the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt, which you probably just heard coughing right there in the countdown.
And good evening, everybody. It is Enforcer Matt on this side of the mic, and welcome back to day 139 of the news.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of the war in Ukraine. But just to let y'all know, we actually unmute our mics about 20 seconds before the intro is over. And so I was sitting here, and I don't know if y'all heard it as well as me, but I was sitting here getting ready to start everything, and I heard Matthew go, and I was like, oh man, everyone probably just heard that. But anyways, welcome back, everyone. And of course, we're going to be going over the past 48 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine. And I have to say, Putin has set the bar even lower. He's delirious. He's trying to cope with the Russian army pretty much being bogged down at this point and not even continuing any offensives. And he's now literally changed the entire definition of what winning this war is. I don't know if this is him preparing to go into peace talks or if this is just his way of mentally coping with the situation, but it's a very sad sight to see that he is so insane he can't just admit that the Russian military has run into a lot of problems, I guess you could say, inside of Ukraine. We'll, of course, be covering that almost first thing on stream tonight. And speaking of which, let's go over the schedule and see what we're going to be covering first tonight. So, believe it or not, we're actually going to be starting off, considering that Putin is the topic of tonight, we will be starting off in Russia, in Moscow specifically. We actually have some additional news that does confirm that the whole thing of Alaska is ours is serious business, and it's actually something that the Russians are starting to push as a political movement within the country. After we cover all of the Moscow news, we'll then be moving into Belarus to cover our next-door neighbor lunatic, I guess Russia's next-door neighbor lunatic, Lukashenko, who's also said some pretty crazy stuff today. After that, we'll then be moving down into Ukraine and covering our location unknowns. Just for those of y'all who do not know, the blue markers and the dark gray markers will be covered today. Blue signifies day 138, and dark gray is day 139. If you would like to take a better look at the legend here at the top left corner of the screen, which describes the colors and everything on the map and what they stand for, and also take an individual look at these markers for yourself on your own time, there is a link in the description below to this map, the exact one I'm using on stream. Usually it's updated, sometimes it isn't, but I made sure tonight that it was up to date, and so y'all should be able to see the exact same map I'm looking at. After we cover the location unknowns, we're then going to start moving towards the Kharkiv area. But before we get there, we're of course going to take a quick little pause to answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on into the Kharkiv area and the northern Donbass. Actually, let me make sure. Yeah, we're just going to keep it with the northern Donbass tonight. I was just making sure that our marker numbers were normal. And after we cover the northern Donbass news and the Kharkiv news, we'll then move down towards the Donetsk area. But of course, before we get there, we're going to answer another 3 questions from the chat. After we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving on to the southern front news in the southern Donbass, Mariupol, which we've gotten a small amount of news out of. That's actually old footage, and I would like to make that clear and just clear something up. A lot of y'all may have watched the summary video of today, and the first clip that was in there was of a BTR-4 gunner firing at targets that were Russian. He pretty much wiped out an entire platoon on film. The thing is, I forgot to say this while I was recording it, but that was old footage from the Battle of Mariupol, and the reason why it was brought up we'll talk about later on in the stream, but I just want everyone to know, and I also put a pinned comment on that video to let everyone know when they were scrolling down to the comments to point out the flaw, that it was in fact a flaw, and here's the reason why, and here's why it's happening, and then people still went to the comments section anyways and just didn't read, so interesting right there. That showed me something that people don't read too much, but beyond that, we'll cover that news that was shown on the summary today that was pretty contentious, and after that, we'll then be moving into the Tokmak area, which is one of the few areas we've seen any news from of the southern front today, and after that, we're then going to move towards the Kherson area and cover all of the news from Novokakhovka, Mykolaiv, and Kherson itself. We've actually seen a pretty decent amount of fighting there today from the Ukrainian Marines, and it is showing that action is picking up in the area as far as video evidence is going. After that, we'll then move out into the Black Sea, which we've seen very weird, very bizarre video today come out of there. really no way to describe it until we get to it, so I'll just save that for later, and after that, we'll actually have covered all of our news, and we'll shoot up to Kyiv and listen to the speech from President Zelenskyy on day 139, and that will wrap up our news segment for the night, and then we'll move into a never-ending question segment that will keep running until the end of the stream, whenever that may be. So with that, strap yourselves in, because we're going to Moscow first, and I want to make sure that y'all at least have some kind of helmet or protection on your head. If you listen to Putin talk without any kind of protection available to you, you can lose brain cells and you can develop some kind of neurological cancer. I would just like y'all to know that in advance, because what y'all are about to hear is him moving the finish line, the goalpost, I guess you could call it, so low that it's below what they've already done. And so with that, here's Putin coping in front of the Duma, which is the Russian version of the parliament. So here's the video. I'm just going to let y'all see this and read the text of speech. Of course, you can hear his voice, and I would like y'all to hear the inflections that the goofball is putting out. So here's the video.
На что хотел бы обратить внимание? Они должны были бы понять, что уже проиграли с самого начала нашей специальной военной операции, потому что ее начало означает и начало кардинального слома миропорядка по-американски. Это начало перехода от либерально-глобалистского американского эгоцентризма к действительно многополярному миру. Миру, основанному не на придуманных кем-то для себя эгоистических правилах, за которыми нет ничего, кроме как стремления к гегемонии. Не на лицемерных двойных стандартах, а на международном праве, на подлинном суверенитете народов и цивилизаций, на их воле жить своей исторической судьбой, своими ценностями и традициями, и выстраивать сотрудничество на основе демократии, справедливости и равноправия. И надо понимать, что этот процесс остановить уже невозможно.
Oh man, a lot to break down here, but let's sit here and go through Putin's speech over again now that I've let everyone hear it and actually read it pretty much on like a live non-stop feed. Let's go back to the very beginning and break down everything that this goofball said. The West should have realized that they've lost. From the very beginning of our special military operation in Ukraine. And now here's his explanation. We'll skip forward to that. Because its commencement also meant the start of a fundamental breakdown of the American world order. I don't know if he realizes this. It's idiotic to not realize this. But we don't really have a world order, the United States does. Sure, we have NATO. And, of course, the Americas, which are, you know, pretty much our allies, or at least very friendly to us. As well as the Australians, the Japanese, and the Koreans and such. But if you, for example, take a look at India, China, Vietnam, really all of Southeast Asia, and Russia, pretty much the whole continent of Asia, we are not friends with in any means, and we don't have any kind of world order set up there, especially with these goofballs, the Russians. And so I have no idea why he's acting like, oh, you know, we stood up to the American world order and we declared war and we've won now because we did that. And that's such a stupid freaking goalpost to make, because anyone can declare war on anything. And this isn't the first time they've done it. They did it in Georgia. So was that not breaking up the American world order by invading Georgia? You know, was that a totally separate thing? Because by and large, politically, it's literally the exact same thing. But here he is, of course, trying to be the spin doctor and make it sound like the Russians are saving the world from the evil Americans.
Ее начало означает и начало кардинального слома миропорядка по-американски. Это начало перехода от либерально-глобалистского американского.
In a multipolar world, I still don't think he realizes it, but it's already a multipolar world. The problem is that Russia is never going to be a part of it. Russia has an economy and a population so small that there is no way they can compete on the global stage. There are certain prerequisites you have to reach to actually be a global power. One of them is having a strong economy, and the second one is having a sizable population. And with an economy of only around $1.2 trillion and a population of 130 million people, anyone can outdo the Russians. Anyone in Europe, anyone in the far east of Asia, literally anybody who has the I guess you could say the conviction to stand up against the Russians and just push them around could. So I don't know why he's acting like the Russians are spearheading this thing. If you could credit a multipolar world to anyone, I guess you could credit it to the Chinese if you ever wanted to give credit to them for anything. But anyways, we're going to let the speech continue.
Американского эгоцентризма к действительно многополярному миру. Миру, основанному не на придуманных кем-то для себя эгоистических правилах, за которыми нет
I got no
ничего,
comment
кроме
on that
как
one.
стремления к
I don't even know
единению.
what that's talking about.
Не на лицемерных двойных стандартах, а на международных.
And I love how he talks about the basis of international law here, while we've seen the Russian military violate just about every single international rule of war there has ever been. We've watched them kill civilians deliberately. We've watched them bomb civilian infrastructure deliberately. We see them cutting off humanitarian corridors when they agree to open them, and then they forcibly close them in the middle of them being in operation. So I don't know what the hell he's talking about with the basis of international law. If anyone's breaking international law, it's the Russians. And also the genuine sovereignty of peoples and civilizations. Boy, what a quote. What a line right there. I think honestly this whole entire line of subtitle right here ought to go down as a quote for Vladimir Putin with the context involved. The genuine sovereignty of peoples and civilizations. Give me a break. They've literally invaded the Ukrainians, a sovereign nation, a sovereign people, and a civilization on its own, trying to dethrone the government and practically annex the country and create a puppet state out of it. And he's going to sit here and preach about the genuine sovereignty of peoples and civilizations while they're mowing them over in real life. This whole entire line right here is literally the exact opposite of what they're doing.
Праве, на подлинном суверенитете народов и цивилизаций, на их воле жить своей исторической судьбой, своими ценностями и традициями.
He says on the basis of democracy, justice, and equality, while they're going and overthrowing democracy, justice, and equality in Ukraine. And he says this while he kills off political opponents in Russia and never actually allows a real election, and also does a loophole in the Russian constitution where you can run for 2 consecutive terms, step down from the presidency, and then run again after that other term is over, and then become the president practically for life as long as you have a buddy, for lack of a better term, that's willing to switch out the president and prime minister position with you, which is what he's been doing forever.
И выстраивать сотрудничество на основе демократии, справедливости и равноправия. И надо понимать, что этот процесс остановить уже невозможно.
And I don't think he understands that it can be stopped because the Russians aren't really a force to be reckoned with. Speaking of which, this kind of stupidity isn't just going on with Putin. This has made it into the school system in Russia as well, and they're already indoctrinating kids with stupid kind of ideas like Alaska is theirs. And I want to show y'all this video. It's a music video of Russian children and school teachers, and I can't really blame the kids because kids go along with whatever they're told. But I've got to sit here and say these teachers have got to be some of the dumbest rocks on earth, because who in the world would say Alaska is ours when it hasn't been Russia's since 1868? And on top of that, they sold it to us. It's not like we took it from them, then we literally bought it from them. And so listen to this lyric in the video, and you can actually hear Alaska said in Russian. So this isn't any kind of fake subtitles. This is the actual lyrics to the song. Here's the video.
Самураем никогда грудью станем за столицу янтаря. Севастополь наш Крым для потомков сохраним. Гавань Родины.
What on earth? There it is. All right, I'm going to play this back again so that way you can hear it. They say Alaski in there. There's no lying. They literally said it. Alasku, there it is. And so there's a whole bunch of people in the United States who saw the billboards that said Alaska is ours, Alasku nasha, and they said that's not real. People photoshopped those. But here's a video of Russian school children literally singing that they're going to return Alaska to the motherland. So you can't make this stuff up. That's what the Russians are actually pushing as kind of like a political goal in their country now.
Курильских островов до Балтийских берегов, а на земле сей был бы мир. Но если главный командир позовет последний бой,
Boy, they're setting these kids up to get into a bad situation, especially with that kind of mindset of literally making them learn songs talking about Alaska as theirs. I don't think they recognize, I think they're about as delusional as the North Koreans in this regard, that if they attack the United States, it's just not going to end well for them. They may have nuclear weapons, but a conventional war is not going to end up with them winning. And even if they somehow won a conventional war, the nuclear arsenal would ensure that they would never be around to see the day of actually living off of their success. So, not really a smart idea there, but once again, that's kind of what the Russians do, is just a wide amount of very unsmart ideas. With that, we're now going to be moving out of Russia, and we're now going to be moving to Belarus, where we can then hear the same kind of pretty dumb sentiments also being reflected by Lukashenko. And I'm sorry for my strong language during these. I do try and keep a little bit of a bit of fairness to this, but at this point, the Russian political sphere has devolved into such stupidity with their claims and their statements that it's really hard to say that they're not stupid, especially when knowing all the facts of what's going on around the world and where they're at. So here's the video of Lukashenko making a speech today, also talking about the evil West. So here's the video.
Те, которые сегодня развернулись вокруг Беларуси и России, требуют предельной бдительности и концентрации. Странами Запада при откровенном дирижерстве Соединенных Штатов последовательно, методично и даже вопреки собственным национальным интересам, желаниям народов разрушается система глобальной безопасности. В итоге эта целенаправленная политика привела к военному конфликту в Украине. Уверен, что в ходе учебы в военных вузах вы внимательно изучали развитие военно-политической обстановки и отлично понимаете происходящее на наших западных границах. Под видом усиления защиты Европы и разного рода оборонительных учений странами НАТО формируется бронированный кулак, явно создаваемый...
Look at this. Look at this, he just said it. Now they're trying to make it sound like the West is going to go to war with him. He's been saying, as you of course are aware, as you've been taught by the Belarusian military academies, that the West is about to go to war with us. And in fact, that defensive, I guess you could say defensive force that's been set up in Poland, which we all saw in real time on this channel, slowly form as the war went on. He's saying that they've been there since the start, pretty much, before the war even began, as an armored fist to punch straight into Belarus and take them over. And there goes this poor, sad, delusional old man at trying to come up with some kind of a different story and a different spin to make it look like they're on the defensive, and it's not them who's actually on the offensive. It's... Anyways, you don't get the point. I'm just going to let the speech run.
Не для защиты. Военные это видят. Более того, в последнее время, и мы это подробно обсуждали вчера с президентом Российской Федерации, более того, разрабатываются стратегические планы нападения на Россию. И главное направление удара, история повторяется.
Look, what is this insanity? He's saying the West has been supporting Ukraine. He's been saying that clearly himself. The West is supporting Ukraine with arms and weapons because they want to destroy Russia and Belarus and bring Ukraine into the fold because they're full of Nazis and terrible people. And now he's saying that the West, the European Union and the United States, want to invade Russia. And let me show this to y'all on a map to kind of show y'all the stupidity of this idea. He doesn't want to, the West does not want to invade Russia through the Baltic states, where they actually share a direct border with Russia and are the closest to the second largest city in the Russian Federation. No. They don't want to do that. The European Union, after supplying arms and weapons and in fact training Ukrainian soldiers in their own countries, want to actually attack Russia through Ukraine and Belarus and push through there to try and reach the Russian border. Now, that is about the dumbest thing I've ever heard so far, and when you look at that on a map, you could see that that is the stupidest line of argument that anyone could ever make because you're anyways, y'all get the picture. Too much land to cover. It wouldn't really be a surprise attack if they were to attack Russia through Ukraine, because they'd have to cover about 1,000 miles of land before they even got to a Russian border. So I'm going to let the video continue from here.
Через Украину и через Беларусь. Видимо, новоявленные крестоносцы из Североатлантического альянса вдруг решили, что наступает подходящий момент для очередного броска на восток, забыв, чем закончились аналогичные походы для их исторических.
And now he's trying to call NATO, the United States, and the European Union Nazis by saying, forgetting how similar campaigns ended for their historical predecessors. And I don't think he also realizes that while, and not to give credit to anyone in particular, but while the Germans did lose World War II, they did manage to take all of Belarus and Ukraine. And so if that's the goal, the quote-unquote historical predecessor certainly succeeded at that, but that's such a stupid argument to make as well, because they're not really our historical predecessors. We're actually the well, in fact, the Soviet Union and the United States, along with NATO, were the antithesis of what he's trying to call our historic predecessors. The United States literally sprung up as a superpower in response to the Nazis and managed to put them down along with the help from the British, the French, and the Soviet Union. And so that's a really stupid point to make there as well.
С западными странами на земле и в воздухе активно ведется разведка, осваивается военная логистика, проводятся учения, перебрасываются техника и запасы из других регионов, параллельно увеличиваются военные бюджеты.
And parallel increases in military budgets. Now, that's one thing that that Belarus isn't saying as kind of like a scary thing. They're actually saying that because they're envious and they're jealous that Western countries are successful enough that we have enough spare money to start throwing more into the military. Because if Belarus did that, they would have to stop feeding everyone because they would literally run out of money in the government to be able to do something like that. So, you know, you can see stupidity being reflected across the board, both from Lukashenko and Putin, and it just keeps getting worse. At the beginning, you could say that it was unfactual and untrue, but they've kept on embellishing the original untrue claims more and more, and further, and now they're trying to move the goalposts of when they actually won this war down so low that they've reached the point of misinformation and untruthfulness into the straight category of stupidity and just blindness. And they're now pushing that onto their populations. We still don't see the Belarusians doing anything. There has been the indication that there may be a buildup at the border, but we haven't gotten any satellite footage or video to confirm that, which is, of course, the arbiter of our truthfulness here on this channel, and so we haven't been able to confirm that yet. But based off of that kind of rhetoric, of course, they're trying to make it look like their enemy is the West. And they're, of course, saying once more, we need to take Alaska, we need to take the Baltic states, and we also need to keep an eye on Poland as well. And Russia, of course, wants to take back parts of Poland to pretty much reform the Russian Empire in its former glory. But with that, enough of watching the stupidity of these two guys. Let's actually look at what their stupidity creates in the field, which is death and destruction, mostly for the Russians these days, as we can see here on film. And so we're going to start off in the location unknowns on day 138, which was Monday, and then the dark gray dots, of course, once again to reiterate, are today from Tuesday. And so starting off, we can see incendiary ammo being used in Ukraine. Once again, a war crime, and I'll explain why. War crimes with incendiary ammunitions have to be caused by the burning of soldiers. And as you can see right here, these are definitely not going to be killing any soldiers in the impending explosion, and that's the only way that you can use incendiary ammunition against soldiers, as if you're to use it in pretty much a, I guess you could say, ground burst, if you'd like to call it. I know that's not the correct term, but if the shell is to hit the ground and then explode and kill the soldiers in the following explosion, that is the only way that you can legally use incendiary rounds in war. If you're to use them in this fashion, where they explode as an air burst and then the incendiary fragments trickle down on top of the soldiers and burn them alive, that is a war crime. And we can see the Russians doing just that right here.
Смотри, что делают, дяди, нахуй.
It's sickening. They've been doing this throughout the entire war, and they've never stopped ever since the very beginning. and they just keep on going. And you would think at some point that the United States would put their foot down, because I think at this point we should include that in the category. No incendiary ammunition should be used. We have not seen the Ukrainians use them so far. Actually, I'll take that back. I think we've seen them use them only once on film, but we've seen the Russians use incendiary ammunitions about 5 or 7 times, somewhere in that range, on film. And so at some point, considering that it is a blatant war crime to use them in this fashion, you would think that the Western world would step up and say, if you keep on using those, we will get directly involved. And hopefully someday we will put our foot down so that way these kinds of war crimes don't continue to happen. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can actually see one of the first videos of the Panzerhaubitz's smart munitions exploding over a tank. And this is the first time we've seen this on film. Keep that in mind. There's a Russian tank. It appears to be a T-72 or a T-80. That's really inconsequential. But what you can see here, this little white dot that's slowly gliding its way down is in fact one of the Panzerhaubitz's smart munitions. We actually got the name of this on stream before. Sadly, I did forget it in between that stream and this one, but I remember the principle it worked off of, which is where it pretty much parachutes down towards the target, guiding itself the entire way dead onto it. I believe it's GPS located, and then it explodes as an airburst above the target. Whether it be vehicle or infantry is inconsequential, but you can see that happening right here on film. And watch as this tank gets plastered. Yep, that tank's out of action. It looks like it went through the upper roof of the turret and the glacis, which is of course weak enough that really any kind of artillery burst, whether it be air burst or direct hit, can puncture straight through the roof and cause irreparable damage and most likely loss of the vehicle and crew, to make it in technical terms. Pretty much what I just said is that it killed the tank. So great to see, and it's wonderful to know that the Panzerhaubitzes can be used, I guess you could say, completely with the original ammunition that the Germans have been using, as well as the quick rate of fire that the Panzerhaubitze is known for. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some Ukrainian soldiers ambushed, and we actually see this from the perspective of one of the Ukrainian soldiers inside the truck. And so without further ado, I'm going to let y'all see the video. It pretty much speaks for itself. They're now dismounting the vehicle, and we can hear Ukrainian soldiers firing off into the distance. And you can hear, faintly in the distance, it's pretty quiet, but you can hear some return fire. You now see the soldier crouching and firing his AK, but sadly we can't see where exactly he's firing it at. The camera is tilted a little bit to the right.
Левее возьми.
You hear someone shouting in the distance. When you hear some fire in the distance there, it sounded like it may have been a BMP-2 that was firing. We see some explosions happening right in front of them, but I'm not sure what those are being caused by. We couldn't really see the results of the firefight on film. We didn't actually see the Russians on film, but we did hear a faint amount of incoming fire, which did tell us that it was apparently a very small firefight. It seemed like at the end of that video, the firefight had practically ended. But still, incredibly interesting that we saw an ambush on a Ukrainian armored car. Within a matter of a minute, the firefight was already over after they clambered out of the car. So a pretty interesting film. Sadly, we don't get to assess how badly the Russians were hit, or if they were hit at all. They may have just withdrawn from the firefight as soon as it started. We're not entirely sure, but a very interesting clip at that. With that, we're now going to be moving out of day 138's news, and we're now going to be moving into day 139. Starting off, we can see Ukrainian artillery destroying more Russian positions. Let's get that video up. Hopefully it loads. There we go. And so, here's the video. of the Ukrainians making sure that the Russians go snap, crackle, and pop. One of the shells at the very beginning of this video, if we watch it again, hits a tank dead on, and it immediately begins to brew up. Right there.
Вторая пошла.
Есипенко, давай, блядь, Обама, блядь. По 400 рядом, свечким в огонь. Обама.
Смотри, смотри, смотри.
Наваливайте, блядь, пацаны, давай, давай, давай.
It's toasting quite nicely now.
Напиши, блядь, все, дякую, блядь. Влучання, блядь. Это пизда, нахуй. Микола, благодаря твоей бабушке.
Смотри, что делается. Вот, сейчас 2 пошло, смотри, сейчас там 2 ляжет. Все нормально горит, смотри.
You know, just to make a qualitative statement, isn't it crazy? You know, you never really think about this kind of stuff, but wars happen in a normal world, and usually whenever you think of war, you know, you think of movies, because that's usually the way people think of war. It's the most common way people see it. And so you think of like a grainy blue filter and everything's drab and it's cloudy and the ground around them is muddy and nasty looking. But wars happen in normal places amongst all these beautiful yellow and green fields and tree lines in Ukraine in the middle of summer, which normally would be just another beautiful day in Ukraine like everywhere else. But in the middle of all this beauty, there is war going on and front lines moving backwards and forwards, hundreds of people dying per day, and it's really honestly crazy to see kind of the difference in between what normal life is, which is just the normal scenery around this tank, and then watching this tank just get obliterated in the middle of it all. And it kind of puts it into picture what wars are really like. You don't actually have a discernment in between where a war is or when one's happening or not visually. It's just happening amongst a normal everyday life kind of background, if that makes sense. Hopefully that made sense with what I was talking about there, but I'm just going to let the video continue. We can now see a second tank got hit, and now it's brewing up in the tree line as well, and the artillery is really pounding that position. We just saw 2 more rounds come in, just one after the other. And now something else has been hit. Well, actually, I'm sorry. I think that may have just been the other tank that had an ammunition detonation, and we can see the other one did as well. And based off of those explosions, I don't even think the tanks are there anymore. And so I'd assume that those 2 have definitely been destroyed. So with that, that is the end of that video. But once again, an incredibly interesting one, and it does put the contrast in between normalcy and war into perspective with how beautiful that landscape was and the war that was going on right in the middle of it. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we're going to unfortunately see an M777 hit by a Krasnopol. Now, I usually discredit Russian news. In fact, I discredit all Russian news these days because it's just so fake. But footage like this is incredibly hard to fake, and so I have to assume that this was an M777 that was destroyed. But just one, which is incredibly important. The Ukrainians have about 110 to 130 of them, as far as we know. And so a single one of them being destroyed isn't a massive loss. And I believe over the course of this war, we've only seen about 4 of them be destroyed, which is an incredibly small figure compared to the rest of the M777s they have. When you see the M777 right there, it's a faint gray outline. I mean, you see that it's kind of already smoldering, which makes me assume that it was hit before. And while I am showing this footage, I just want to remind everyone again that one loss like this isn't anything terrible. The Ukrainians will take losses here and there, but a nickel and diming kind of amount of losses is not going to make them lose this war, and losing this one piece is not going to make this front line destabilize. But with that, that is the end of that film. A little bit unfortunate, but of course, it doesn't really mean a lot for the Ukrainians. With 100, let's just say that they have 4 M777s destroyed so far over the course of this war, and they have 115 of them. So we take 4 and divide it by 115, and that means that only 3.5% of Ukraine's M777s have been knocked out, which is an incredibly small figure, because when you compare that to, say, Russian tank forces, and they've lost about 40 to 50% of their tanks over the course of this war, these kinds of losses are actually quite sustainable, because by the time that Ukraine loses 20% of their M777s, the Russians will probably have lost around 60 to 65% of their tank force. So not that bad. Moving on to our last bit of Location Unknown news, we can see a minor mishap happen in a Russian camp. I think someone forgot to not smoke around the ammunition. I would say that that wasn't really a normal kind of accident. I think someone needs to check where they're smoking. Always make sure to smoke far away from ammunition and gasoline, because those two things, along with a cigarette, can cause nasty results. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the location unknown news and on to the Kharkiv and Northern Donbass news. But before we get there, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions, we're then going to move on into the next question segment. And so with that, what do we got?
All right, so for our first question segment, up first we have a $50 super chat from Blue Flame 777, who says, is Putin and his mother lovers? By the way, my dogs like orc gravy.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Blue Flame. It helps us out a whole load. And of course, we're very appreciative because this is the only way our channel keeps running. But is Putin and his mother lovers?
Yikes.
That's a pretty strong statement there. As far as we know, Putin has multiple. What should we describe them as? Multiple. You know what I'm talking about, Matthew. You know, like send flowers to. You know what I'm about to say.
Oh yeah. Multiple acquaintances of the other sort.
Yeah, I guess that would be the best way to say it. Thank you, Matthew, for saying that. So I wouldn't say that he's necessarily a mother lover. I would say, well, he's a mother lover, but he's a lover of other people's mothers, I guess you could say. And it's good to hear that your dogs do like orc gravy. Orc gravy, of course, is in high supply these days. Of course, the Ukrainians are helping to open up a brand new industry. And as far as I know, it's actually USDA approved, grade A, which is kind of surprising considering the source. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, Blue Fam. I hope you enjoyed our little jokes that we made there. And with that, we're going to be moving on to the next question, but thank you so much once again for your support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And I see some people in the chat got the reference the Enforcer just made, so good on you for catching that one. And up next, we have a $20 super chat from none other than Kaltenberg, one of our channel legends, who says, Slava Ukraine.
And Slava Ukraini, Kaltenberg. And I thank you so much for being a constant supporter of this channel. With folks like you, we're able to keep running, and we're always incredibly appreciative of everyone's support. And so thank you once again, Kaltenberg. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Gary Robbins, another channel regular, who says, what did the Enforcer and Enforcer Matt do on your day off yesterday? So I'll go ahead and cover my end. I actually spent Monday refining my personal statement for law school and catching up on a couple of work matters as well. So I'll let the Enforcer take away what he did on Monday.
So what I did on Monday is that I tried to get a letter of recommendation request out to one of my former professors, which did succeed, and it is being worked on. So I'm finally getting that second letter of recommendation to go to law school with, which I'm very happy about. And also the other thing is that I spent my whole entire day yesterday working on a, well, I guess I'll say it now because now it's been scrapped and replaced with something else. I was working on a video, and I would actually like for Matthew to throw up a poll on this one because I'd like to see if people would be interested in this topic in the future. Hopefully I can find out a way to cover it. But I was actually trying to make a video on the difference in between London and the City of London, because a lot of people don't know this, but London isn't a single city. There's actually 2 separate Londons within London City, and I'll kind of show y'all that on a map real quick, and hopefully Matthew can have a poll up while I do this. But here's London, and as far as you can see, pretty much the M25 is the very outskirts of London. That's really hard to say because it's not really London City. That's just the outskirts of London because that's the name of London. It's just London. Then inside of London, in this little area right here, which you can kind of still see outlined by these roads, which are very weirdly lined up, like the A40, and also, what's the name of this road here? Farrington Street, or kind of like the edge on one side, and then it kind of makes a nice semicircle around the rest of it to the Tower of London. This little area here is called the City of London, and it's an entirely separate entity from London. It has its own mayor, it has its own, I guess you could say election system, it has its own police, it raises its own taxes. it's pretty much an entirely separate city in London. And the crazy thing is that it only has 8,000 people living in it. And the companies have more votes inside the city of London. When I say companies, I'm talking about companies that you can physically kind of like get an idea of, like, you know, for example, these aren't actual, I guess you could say, voting companies in the city of London, but like Dasani, Walmart, obviously none of those, but you kind of get the picture. They actually have votes in the city of London, and it's an incredibly interesting story, but sadly, I couldn't really figure out how to cover it and make it make sense because it's just so convoluted, so I dropped that one, and now we're going with a new one, which, now that it's actually in the works, I'm going to tell y'all that one is coming up, and right now we are eyeballing this upcoming Monday. We actually have a video coming out. It's going to be 5 minutes long, and it's going to be talking about government cheese, which was talked about on stream before, and I hope y'all are looking forward to it, because it's going to be an incredibly cool 5-minute video. It just pretty much describes the story of why the US government owned billions of pounds of cheese inside of caves in the middle of nowhere, and so I'm putting it together. I think we have about the first 30, well, I think. Why am I saying that? I'm literally the only one working on it. I have about the first 30 seconds of it done out of the first 5 minutes, and so it's hopefully going to come together really soon, and y'all are going to have a video to watch on Monday. And if it actually does all come together, and it can be done by Monday, I'm going to put it on Premiere, and so that way everyone will have something to watch. It won't be a 2-hour stream or an hour and 30-minute stream. It will just be a 5-minute video, but it'll still be put on Premiere at the exact same time that these streams run nightly. So with that, I hope that kind of addresses the comment there, and I thank you so much once again for the support, because that support is helping us to be able to look into the future and think about doing things like trying to span out into videos that don't necessarily cover the war. And so with that, thank you once again to everyone for their support. I hope you all have enjoyed this little question segment, and with that, we're now going to move into our next segment of news, which will be the Kharkiv and Northern Donbass area, and after we cover all of this news, we'll then be moving into another question segment. And so, without further ado, let's get right into the news in the Kharkiv area, starting off on day 138, where we can see the Ukrainians actually destroying Nona artillery pieces in the Kharkiv area. In fact, it seems as the war continues to go on, the Ukrainians have been destroying more and more Russian forces in the Kharkiv pocket, more so than when it originally began to exist. And so I'm wondering if the Ukrainians are allowing this pocket to exist to just try and continue to rack up Russian casualties because they have to fill in this area of the front. The artillery is now coming in where those Nonas were earlier in the video, and we can now see that they've hit the ammunition store of one of those artillery pieces. The artillery is still coming down. It looks like that shot may have been a little bit off. I'm not sure if there was artillery over there. We couldn't see that on film. But I'm going to assume, since there is a lack of information, that that shot may have been a little off. The fires continue to burn, and it now appears to have exploded. I was about to say it had spread, but now it's exploded. And so I would have to take a pretty good assumption that the artillery piece, which was positioned right nearby, has also gone up in flames. Now we can see another amount of ammunition going up in flames behind the first one. A little bit of smoldering, snap, crackling, and popping. And one important thing that everyone always needs to remember is that these artillery shells, when they explode with about the same amount of shrapnel as a conventional artillery round exploding. And so when they blow up right near an artillery piece like that, which I don't know if that was normal ammunition or not, that blew up the whole building, but they usually take the artillery pieces with them, just in kind of like the collateral damage side of things. And with that last explosion, I don't think anyone, man, beast, or whatever, made it out of there alive, and certainly the artillery pieces didn't either. And so it's great to see that the Ukrainian artillery has scored a pretty good hit, and it looks like it took out the Russians with their own artillery shells. Pretty neat in its own way. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the day 139 news on the other side of the pocket, where we've seen the Ukrainian artillery once again destroying more Russian positions today. I mean, you see them overlooking the ammo depot. It appears that there's some kind of a yellow bus there in the yard. Also, just in case y'all are wondering, how in the world did I locate this to Kharkiv? Because it said here, and I want to act like I'm a big brain for a moment, although I feel like this was kind of a common sense thing to do. It says Ukrainian M777s destroy Russian artillery position and ammo depot, but it doesn't say where it is. But if you look at the badges at the bottom of the screen, all of them, except for the third one, say Kharkiv on it in Ukrainian. And so I just assumed, big brain moment, when I read the Ukrainian Cyrillic and it said Kharkiv, I was like, oh, these units must be near Kharkiv. And so this happened around Kharkiv. And we can actually see now that this was only about the first 20 seconds of the film that we didn't see. And now they've added in the M777s that were firing at this position to blow it up. So it just has a little bit of extra added video in it, and those first 20 seconds we didn't see in the last one. And so I'm going to save all the time because this is just the same video running over twice, but it is pretty cool to see that they did go in and add in some extra footage that gave us a better idea of what was happening and why the artillery shells were landing far over to the right side of the screen, because from what we can tell here, that looks like where this building is. And so they may have been trying to go for that ammunition dump, and that may be what blew up. Well, I don't know, because that was the other building. That one didn't blow up. So it's just interesting to see them add more context to it, to say the least. But with that, I'm not going to show that one to y'all again. It's a duplicate of the last one, just with more added footage at the beginning. But with that, we have no actions to speak of in the Kharkiv area that have produced any results. We haven't seen the Russians conducting any offensives as per usual, and we haven't seen the Ukrainians conducting any either. One does have to remember on top of that the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back incredibly far, and as far as we know, the Russians have never really reorganized in the Kharkiv area. Right now, they may be as disoriented and off-kilter as they were when the Ukrainian counterattacks originally occurred and pushed them all the way back towards Stary Saltiv and also all the way up to Veliki Prokhody. Not entirely sure about that at the moment. Of course, Russian units and their conditions are a little vague. We don't really get a lot of information on that, but as far as we can tell, they are still disorganized because they've never tried to continue any kind of offensive operation since then. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the area, past Stary Saltiv, which I do have to give a little honorable mention. We just did speak about it, and I do always have to remind everyone that the Ukrainians do have the ability to push the Russians back incredibly far. You have to remember that at one point in this war, the Russian forces were on the literal ring road around Kharkiv at the E40 and managed to push them back a whopping 20 miles from the ring road to Stary Saltiv, and that is a massive push, especially considering that some of Russia's most concentrated forces in terms of numbers were in this area. And so going off of that, give it some time, I would say probably about another month or so, and we will see the Ukrainians making massive ground like that again in some other part of the country. I know that's not going to wipe the Russians out in a matter of months, covering only 20 miles, but still, the Ukrainians aren't toting to be a world superpower, and them pushing the Russians back that far is still much better than not pushing them back at all or losing. But with that, we're now going to move out of the Kharkiv area after that honorable mention. Of course, there's nothing to report from the Chuhuiv area, but we did get a little bit of news out of the Balaklia area where the 93rd Brigade is. We actually saw an SPG of the 93rd Brigade firing at the Russians from inside the cab. Well, I guess you could say inside the turret. That would be a better thing to say. So here's the video. Of course, music, sadness. And I would like to say this. Now, I always try and be as fair as possible. This SPG does look pretty dirty. Usually, Ukrainian SPGs are incredibly clean. They are spotless through and through. But this one does appear to have a little bit of grime on it. A little bit sad, but still, what can we say? They're still doing pretty good. So here's the video of them firing. And now it looks like they're about to go through the process of reloading, but then the video ends right there. Still really cool to see, and we do know that the 93rd Brigade and its artillery units are pounding the Russians into submission in this area. Those are the only videos we've gotten out of the whole area in this war since about the past month, is the 93rd Brigade hitting the Russians either with Stugnas or with artillery, and they've done incredibly well in both of those regards. We haven't seen the Russians making any advances in this area as of right now. I have got an idea, though, that the Russians did take Balaklia around a month ago, but we've never gotten video evidence to confirm that, and so that front line may be inaccurate. But once again, lack of video evidence means no change to the front line. With that, we're now going to be moving down past the area of Balaklia, and we're now going to be moving into the Izium area, where, crazily enough, we have nothing to report. There's been no activity in this area as far as we can tell on video. Moving past that towards Slovyansk, which we've been assuming will be filled with activity, we haven't really seen anything down here either. It appears that the Russians have stalled on the Severodonetsk River, or somewhere near around it, considering that the Ukrainians maybe have defensive positions on these hills and between these villages that I'm kind of highlighting here with my mouse cursor, and we haven't really seen them make any progress here either. But moving on towards the Lysychansk area, we have seen a little bit of activity, and we also seen an old video that we never saw before, and that video shows the Ukrainians destroying the railway bridge in between Rubizhny and Severodonetsk. Well, I'm sorry, Lysychansk. That's a correction I need to make right there. But anyways, here's the video, and you're about to see the shockwave visibly for about a couple of seconds. It was a massive explosion. Golly. That was an explosion for the books, and I believe... Now, we can't really tell for certain, because I always want to make sure that I don't miff the Russian bots, you know, because they always say, you can't see that, how do you know? But I think that that bridge may have been destroyed. Not entirely sure, though, because we can't see it on video. Oh, man. But look at that freaking shockwave. The rest of the video just shows the mushroom cloud. But look at the shockwave. I feel like if you were around that, gosh, your eardrums would have blown out if you were right up on it. That must have like shattered, well, not shattered bones. That must have like rattled your bones, busted out your eardrums if you were near it. They say that this explosion was around 3 tons of dynamite, which, based off of the explosion, I would assume that's pretty true, and it was definitely a crazy looking one. And so, of course, great to see that the Ukrainians did knock out the bridge. Sadly, that didn't stop them from losing the city in the end, as the Russians then pushed from the west on pretty much open ground that slowly sloped upwards towards Lysychansk, and then, you know, pushed the Ukrainians out of the city by threatening them with encirclement, which was a little unfortunate, but the Ukrainians still put up a hell of a fight for both Severodonetsk and Lysychansk and made the Russians pay for every mile, which is about the best that one could hope for. With that, we're now going to move on to our next bit of news near the Lysychansk area, where we're seeing a Russian MLRS barrage just south of the city today. Once again, take note of the slightly charred yet beautiful fields of Ukraine and how wars are happening in the middle of these picturesque scenes that one would pay to have a painting for. We can see 5 grads right here. They may be tornadoes, but I'm assuming they're grads. And we can now see them firing. And I would assume that this isn't the first time they fired, because if we notice, the plume of smoke expands right out into this burned area of grass. And so I think this may be the second time that they've used the same position to fire from, not from. And hopefully the Ukrainians are taking note of that. And with that, that's the end of the video. And hopefully the Ukrainians can counter-barrage that with M777s or some other kind of artillery system. But I'm about to show y'all in a little bit, once we start covering the Luhansk city news, that the Ukrainians have bigger plans for their artillery, which we'll cover here in a minute. But moving on to our next bit of news, which occurred on day 138, we can see that the Russians are so scary that the enemy isn't even there. When the Russians arrive, the Ukrainians literally just disappear. As we can see in this firefight, they didn't even bother to fire back at the Russians. They ran away. And so I hope you can pick up the sarcasm. Here's the video. Usually we see the Ukrainians having fun and having a little bit of a joke, but that's the face of an insane person. I don't think that's someone who's normal in the head. Look at the... I don't mean to trash on the guy too bad, because maybe he's actually crazy or something, but if you look at those eyes, there's nothing but deadness in those eyes. This is the kind of guy to go around and attack homeless people in New York City or something similar, because that's not a guy having fun. This is a guy who's lost his mind. So I'm going to let the video continue with the crazy guy in context. Pepsi? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. I don't know if you can see this, Matthew. There's a Pepsi chair. Hang on,
I think it's a little behind for me. Can you share? Oh wait, I just saw it. Yes, it was. It was a Pepsi chair.
Hopefully this is the right screen right here. But that is 100% a Pepsi chair.
It is.
I just noticed that out of the corner of my eye. I was like, hang on. I was like, what on earth? If y'all don't know, the Soviet Union and Pepsi actually have a long-going history. And Pepsi actually beat Coca-Cola there, because Coca-Cola is, of course, a symbol of the United States, so the Soviets would never let that in. But Pepsi found out that there was a way to get the Russians to like the stuff and buy it, and so they ended up actually trading pretty much an entire Russian fleet, a Russian naval fleet at the time, for a shipment of Pepsi, which was a really cool story. We might make a video about that in the future, but look, the scars of Pepsi still remain on the former Soviet lands because there's a Pepsi chair. But I don't think these guys are drinking Pepsi. They're either on crack or drinking vodka, one or the other. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Lysychansk area of the front, and we're going to start moving down towards Popasna and Bakhmut here in a second, but I want to make sure that we get to the juiciest bits of news first. Y'all, of course, know that the HIMARS has been in Ukraine for a little bit of a while now, and we've seen it proving itself as a pretty long-range and heavy-hitting kind of MLRS. But today, they have really proven how capable the HIMARS can be as guided missiles of the HIMARS rocket system hit a ammo depot in the center of the city of Luhansk. We have 2 videos of this ammo dump on fire after the HIMARS missiles hit it. And y'all are probably saying, well, how do you know it's a HIMARS? The HIMARS is just about the only thing in the Ukrainian military's inventory that could hit these ammo depots. And with a ballistic missile, air defenses would have been activated because it's a pretty large missile. You can pick it up on a radar, as well as the sound that a ballistic missile makes. But when you see the explosions here in this video, you don't really see any of that. It has turned into a hellscape out there. There are probably Russians out there at that ammo depot like we saw the last one, where they're running around in literal hell on earth, trying to escape the raining fire from above, blowing up all around them. But this is about one of the largest ammo dumps we've ever seen that's exploded this far behind the lines outside of Kursk or Belgorod. And now y'all can see why the HIMARS was a big deal. If y'all didn't see it yet, now you can see why it's a huge deal. The range of it being a 50-mile hitting missile, and it can be GPS guided straight onto a target, really means a lot. Not for hitting infantry and frontline units, but completely depriving the infantry and frontline units from their ability to fight by knocking out ammunition, communications, and command centers. And we can see that that's definitely happened in Luhansk, and we can see a second video that backs that up again. So let me get this one up here real quick. Same explosion, different angle. Here's the video.
Подразделения вооруженных сил Украины с Артемовского направления нанесли очередной удар по Луганской Народной Республике. По самому городу попаданий нет.
They're trying to make a propaganda story, I guess, about how this is a Ukrainian ammo depot inside of Luhansk that's blown up. Of course, that's all assumptions. That's probably not what the guy's saying at all. But still, I don't know how the Russian news can put a spin on that to make it seem good for them. That looks like a massive ammo dump that got slammed by a HIMARS and is now burning up into nothing. And tomorrow, the next day, the Russians and the LPR will roll out there to see what's left, and there'll be almost nothing left. Probably a little bit, but not a lot. With that, we're now going to be moving out of Luhansk and the huge news of seeing the capability of the HIMARS. And real quick, I actually want to find out how far that is from the front line. Let's just go with the HIMARS being near Ilovaisk on the highway in between Svitlodarsk. That is a range of exactly 50 miles. And so the HIMARS would have had to have been pretty close to the front lines to hit that. And it could have been in the outskirts of the city, which could have made it a little bit easier to hit. But still, the HIMARS has such a range that nothing within the DPR and LPR, I guess you could say support-wise, is safe anymore. Every single ammo dump, every single communications hub, every single command center is now a target for the Ukrainians, and they have the ability to hit them. I would have to say that this is probably more important than the Ukrainians getting an ability to knock out the Kerch Bridge. Because why knock out the bridge when you can literally knock out all the supplies that are being brought across the bridge wherever they are in Ukraine? And this isn't the only place we've seen this in the front lines today. This actually continues through most of the country, but we'll get to those in a bit. But with that, we're now going to move on to the positive news, where we've seen the interior of a Russian T-90 in eastern Ukraine. I don't know how we got this kind of video. It was taken by an actual crew member, but we could see them apparently firing at a Ukrainian position, although the monitor that he's looking through is so grainy and terrible, you can't really tell. Here's the video. You can see him pointing out the supposed Ukrainian position, but you can see that the screen inside of this T-90 that they're looking through appears to be on 240p. It's very, very low graphics. In fact, this almost looks like he's playing Doom. Give the order to fire. They fired. And we can see nothing right now. All we see is whiteness and an explosion in the distance. But we can't see squat. We don't know what he hit. We don't know what was out there. We can see like a slight shape, like it's a piece of land out there. But beyond that, we can't see anything. Now it sounds like the tank is moving. And let's take a quick moment here to observe and admire these symbols on this pad. I don't even know what these are supposed to be when you look at them. This one looks like traction control. You know, we have the arrow pad, and we also have a button that looks like it'll pull up Google Word, which is always good to have in the middle of a fight. We also see there's 3 squiggly arrows. We see what appears to be some kind of a bar graph, most likely to figure out what your chances are of surviving. We can see a half moon, which I believe has a lot to do with Russian shamanism. Of course, I'm making jokes about all of this. Don't ever think I'm serious when I'm saying this. And we can also see, what are these, Matthew, down here on the bottom right, like the oval with the triangles on them?
I'm not even sure.
I'm not even sure what they're supposed to be either. I don't know what the symbols are supposed to be, but it looks like the Russians had to simplify this for the average Russian soldier, which probably has an IQ of around 60, so that way they can figure out what they need to do. And also, if they ever have a problem or need to write a personal diary in the middle of this whole thing, they can just click the button in the center of the console to pull up Google Word and start writing a memoir to their family or a last will and testament. But with that, that's the end of the video. Not really a lot to see there, and we couldn't see a lot on the screen. Which is also a really other important thing, is to show how technologically backwards a T-90 is. You would think that they would have some kind of a modern scope or a sight that would be in pretty high definition, but you can see that through their camera, they can't see squat. And so I'm highly sure that they don't even know what they're firing at themselves. But with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Popasna area, and we're going to be moving into the Bakhmut area, where we've seen a little bit of unfortunate news of a large Russian MLRS attack that occurred on the outskirts in the middle of the night. And so, here's the video. We actually have two of these showing it from two different angles.
Куда вы, блядь? Куда вы хуярите, вы твари, блядь? Что, по нам, что ли, блядь? Сядьте,
The flashes in the distance are the rockets impacting, and as far as we know, they did hit a residential area. We'll have to get some more information on that. That is an assumption at this point, because we didn't really see that for sure. And now I'm going to show you all the second perspective of the shelling of Bakhmut, which we have from the northern side of the city.
Блядь, Коля, там же мамка бьет. Ебучий слух, ёб твою мать, блядь.
You know,
Пизди.
It looks like, to me, Matthew, that those blue explosions look like power transformers that are being hit.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah, it could be.
Коль,
Это просто пизда, вот все горит, блядь. О, свет въебали, глянь, провода вот.
Где это?
Это ступки, блядь, Санина сторона.
Это пиздец.
Дай я маме наберу.
Это пиздец.
Маме набрать, нет? Пиздец. Саня,
Ты чё, ёбнулся? Не надо так говорить, Коля, не надо так говорить. Ты чё?
That's the end of the videos from Bakhmut showing the barrage. And of course, incredibly unfortunate when you really think about it. And of course, you hear the horror and the anger in the first video of that poor lady who was watching the barrage. And you can just imagine the anger that all of these Ukrainian civilians go through every single day, having to sit there and survive these Russian barrages and hope that eventually the war will go completely into Ukraine's favor. Right now, the Ukrainians do have hand. The Russians have halted all of their operations across the entirety of the front lines, and so they do have a pretty decent amount of breathing room at the moment. But still, considering that this is right after the Ukrainians lost Lysychansk, at least in terms of the past 2 weeks, past 3 weeks of the war, they're kind of on even footing right now in terms of the successes and defeats that both sides had. Hopefully the Ukrainians can turn that around soon. We have heard them getting ready to do that in the Kherson area, which of course we'll be covering here in a bit. But with that, that is all of our northern Donbass news and Kharkiv news for this segment. And so we're now going to start moving on into the Donetsk news and also the entirety of the Southern Front news and the Black Sea news. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick little pause to answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then be moving into our last news segment of the night. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right. And before I get to our first super chat of the segment, I want to recognize our decoders of the stream who figured out the Morse code. We actually had 3 viewers decode it, and I will tell you which ones got it in order of how they said it. So up first, C. Fay decoded it and said, the Morse code says, if Russia is winning, then why do they keep moving the finish line? And then, let's see here, WF2U figured it out second, and then Mark Hodges figured it out third.
Ding, 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 ding. Y'all got it correct. Congratulations to all 3 of y'all for getting that right. That actually is the correct Morse code, and it kind of reflected what I said on stream tonight about Putin's little address to the Duma, is that if he's supposedly winning, then how come they keep on moving the goalpost to this point? Because during the entire war, if y'all have ever noticed, they've always moved the goalpost down, but they've always moved it to a point they hadn't achieved yet. And it's always, well, if we take this extra little amount of land in Ukraine, then we'll have won. But, excuse me if y'all heard that, sorry about that. But if you look at it now he's moved the goalpost so low, they've already passed it, and they've already won. And they won by literally just declaring war. Now he's going with a storyline of, like you hear in every single children's show or something like that. It's not the fight that mattered, it's the friends we made along the way. He's pretty much gone to that, which is pretty much just a like in a kid's movie, it's a valuable life lesson. But at this point in time, in real life, in a situation like this, that is a loser statement. And you're pretty much getting ready to admit, yeah, we've lost the war, but it wasn't really about the war. It was about all the friends we made along the way and just doing it that counted. Like it's almost like he's about to come out with a speech that just says, we gave it a good college try, and that's all that matters, right? Anyways, hope y'all get the point. And of course, that was the correct Morse code message for the night. So congratulations to all three of y'all for decoding that. Y'all are our in-house decoders, and if we can count on anyone to decipher the Morse code, it's the three of y'all. And so thank you once again for doing that. And we're now about to move into the question segment and answer 3 questions from the chat. Also, I'd like to make a note real quick before we move into it, that just because the 3 questions we're going to answer here are super chats does not mean you have to pay to get a question answered. You can ask questions absolutely free, and we will try and answer them at the end of the stream. But we always make sure to put the super chatters first, because of course they're helping us to keep these streams running where we can get on here and answer questions at all. And so we always like to go and appreciate them for their support and helping us to keep running and answer their questions first. But that does not mean you always have to pay to have a question answered. But with that, we're now going to move into the question segment and answer 3 questions from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so up first we have a $50 super chat from Enforcer for President, which we really love that username, by the way.
Yeah, we do.
Who does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Enforcer for President. We appreciate the support very much. And Enforcer, it's your time to shine.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you for your vote in my upcoming election as president. Of course, there's a little bit of a path to go through to get to president. Have to rub elbows in the political sphere. As much as I hate that, I will have to. But well, do I really have to, or could we just create a Lee Spring Army political party that could become a serious contender? That, of course, that's highly unlikely. That's very unrealistic. But still, maybe. I mean, like Zelenskyy did it with Studio 95. Why can't we? But still, speaking about that, I thank you so much for your support, Enforcer for President. It's, of course, going to help this channel keep running, and we're always appreciative to everyone who helps us to keep this thing going. And so thank you once again for the support. Of course, we will try and get there eventually. Probably run for a Senate position or House of Representative position first, which, as much as I don't like, of course, you have to try and do something in that regard, or else your chances are slim to none. But I thank you so much for the support, and with that, we're moving on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $50 super chat from Rick Clay, who says, it seems the introduction of the MLRS are having more of an impact than the M777s. Do you agree?
Could you reread that one for me real quick?
Yes, Rick says, it seems the introduction of the MLRS are having more of an impact than the M777s. Do you agree?
Yes, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. The M777s are a frontline kind of artillery system. They can only fire out to around 20 miles, which, while impressive and really relegates them to not being fired at in terms of counter battery from the front line, they're not as heavy-hitting and as strategic thinking of a weapon as the HIMARS. The HIMARS is almost only used as a strategic weapon instead of just a frontline artillery piece. The HIMARS we've never seen the HIMARS target any units on the front lines. Every single time we've seen the HIMARS used, the Ukrainians are using it for exactly what it's intended to do, which is hitting enemy supplies, communications, and command centers behind the lines. And that's exactly what that kind of MLRS is made for. They're using it exactly to its strengths, and I think that in that regard, it is far more important than any M777. And we've also seen that in the amount of attention they've given to them and the amount of care that they put into making sure that none of them are destroyed. Some of y'all may have seen a video that the Russians put out claiming that they destroyed 4 MLRSs, but that video was wholly untrue. Someone actually found the exact location on Google Earth where that supposed HIMARS destruction occurred, and they found out that those 4 HIMARS-looking, I guess you could say, vehicles on the infrared camera that the Russians were showing were in fact propane tanks that were lined up against the road, and there was some kind of industrial building that just had a large amount of tanks sitting right outside of it. So I hope that kind of clears it up. As far as we know, not a single HIMARS has been destroyed yet, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. There will eventually be a HIMARS that does get destroyed. Everything in war is fallible and can be destroyed, and I think that's something important to note. So if you ever see a single HIMARS getting destroyed, don't think it's the end of the world. It was eventually going to happen. And so I just want to put that out there. But I do entirely agree with your statement that the HIMARS is far more important and far more, I guess you could say, strategic in its use than the M777s. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are going to move on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Jose Diaz, who says, Puerto Rico loves Ukraine. Thanks to Enforcer and Enforcer Matt for fundraising to help our Ukrainian friends. Puerto Ricans decry the thievery and destruction that the fascist Russian orcs do. Gloria Ukrainia.
And thank you so much for the support. Of course, it's wonderful to hear that the Puerto Ricans are always with the Enforcer, and if the Lee Spring Army can count on anything, then we'll count on being in exile in Puerto Rico because it's an island. But anyways, past the jokes. Of course, that is something that we pride ourselves on heavily on this channel, is the amount of support we've been able to get to Ukraine. It's been around 350,000. I didn't do the exact calculations after the fundraiser ended because about $500 extra came in, but we did surpass the $350,000 mark on last Sunday's fundraiser. And I have to say once again, thank you all so much to every single one of y'all who helped us to get to that goal. The fundraisers have been diminishing in size over time. I wouldn't be lying to admit that's true. They went from around getting 30 to 20,000 in our first initial fundraisers to around 7 to 10,000 per fundraiser. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that everyone still cares and everyone's trying their best to send support to Ukraine. And of course, I'm heavily appreciative to all of y'all for helping me to do that, and I hope that we are all able to make a difference in this war in one form or another, whether it's big or small, to try and help out the Ukrainians just that little bit extra. And so thank you all once again for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And of course, we're greatly appreciative of our entire Lee Spring Army and everyone who's helped us to get this far in terms of getting support for Ukraine and as a channel. And so with that, thank you once again, and we're moving on to the next question. And I think this will be the final one of this segment, if I'm correct.
And yes, this is the final one of the segment, and this one goes to Jeff Curtis, who puts in a $20 super chat and says, it's inconceivable that a resolution to the food blockade has not been achieved, and Putin is holding many, the me in particular, hostage to famine and starvation. What about NATO escorts daring the orcs to try and stop them?
Oh, that's a tough one because Ukraine is officially at war, and so I believe technically the Russians can violate their waters and also their I guess you could say port accesses. I think that is something that they could do. Of course, if they couldn't, it would be pretty tough for anyone to fight a war in real life. And so I think that what they're doing is actually legal. We did know, however, that when they lost Snake Island, they did say it was a sign of good faith that they were going to allow humanitarian ships in, but we haven't heard any news following up on that, so I don't know if that's actually come into effect or not. I would assume it hasn't, because if it did, we would be hearing news about Ukrainian ships, well, really international ships entering Ukrainian ports, but we haven't heard of that at the moment, so I am assuming that the blockade still stands. And sending in NATO ships to try and protect these international vessels from a Russian attack or a Russian seizure would be pretty sketchy. I don't know if that would work. I don't know if that's something that NATO could say we actually have the ability to do, and the I guess you could say sovereignty at sea to be able to impose this and just blow through the Russian blockade. I'm not really sure how that will work, but at the moment, I don't think that's possible. Once again, I'm kind of speaking from a stance of ignorance on that point. I don't know a lot about maritime laws or rules. That's something that I will admit I don't really know much about. So with that, I hope I did answer that question to the best of my abilities, but I haven't heard about any ships making it into Ukrainian ports to pick up grains either. And as far as I know, that's probably going to be the way it stays for some time, and I don't think NATO is going to be able to do much to try and get ships into those ports. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And I hope I've answered everyone's questions in this question segment fairly well. Of course, there are some people, and I will give credit, there are some people in the live chat who do know more than me about certain things like maritime laws and the rules of war at sea and such things like that. And so sometimes the answers can actually be found when people respond to it in the live chat itself. But with that, I hope I did answer those to the best of my abilities. Once again, kind of take my answers in some regards like that one with a grain of salt, because, you know, like I said, I don't know everything about it, and so it could be wrong, or it could be right. I'm not really sure, you know, because I have a lack of information there. But with that, we're now going to be moving out of this question segment, and we're now going to be moving into our final stretch of news. This will include the Donetsk region, which also includes Mariupol. We'll then move on into the southern front near Tokmak, and also move into Novokhovka, Kherson, Mykolaiv, and the Black Sea, where we've gotten a small little tidbit of news, which may be incredibly important in the future. And then finally, we'll be moving up to Kyiv to listen to the speech from President Zelenskyy, and that will wrap up our final news segment of the night, and then we'll move into the question segment right after that again. Starting off in Donetsk, we have no news from day 139. Absolutely nothing came out of the area, but we did get two separate pieces of news on day 138, and both of them were near the town of Avdiivka. The first one that we saw was some Russian tanks getting destroyed, both by a Javelin and a Stugna. We saw these shining examples of anti-tank weapons from both the United States and Ukraine knocking out both of these Russian tanks. And so, here's the video. We can see the first tank getting hit. It appears to have been by a Stugna, considering that the blast propelled outwards and sideways from the side of the tank. We now see the crew, well, at least one of them, running from the tank as it is exploding and burning behind them. Tank's now burning, smoldering a pretty good bit. And we can see the second tank appear to have been hit. Let me make sure. Yes, that was certainly the Javelin, because the explosion didn't project out of the side of the vehicle, it projected from the top down. And so the first shot was actually with the Stugna, and the second shot was with the Javelin. And what a cool video to see. You can actually see the two separate systems at work. And you actually we actually have enough evidence and enough video proof to show that that one was a Javelin, because the explosion was top down, and then the Stugna was the first one, because the explosion, and I guess you could say the smoke, propelled out the side of the tank. And so we've seen the best of the, I guess you could say the cream of the crop, that would be the best way to say it, of both countries at work and knocking out Russian tanks. It's great to see that the Russians are still taking losses in this area, although we haven't heard of major military actions for a pretty good bit. With that, we're now going to be moving into our next bit of news, where you see shelling occurring in and around Avdiivka from Russian artillery on supposed Ukrainian positions. We can see here a large trench work that the Ukrainians have made through what appears to be a tree line and a field. And it looks like an artillery shell just landed incredibly close to the trench, and another one landed closer to the dugouts. And I would guess you could say a nest that the Ukrainians have made in this area, but it doesn't appear to have hit any of it dead on. That shot hit the brim of the trench. Now, the shrapnel from that one definitely did travel down it for a length, but of course, Ukrainian trenches have a lot of breaks in them, and so the shrapnel didn't go far. The next explosion appeared to almost be right on the dugout. But we haven't seen any Ukrainian soldiers to speak of. Now we've seen one. We've seen one right here. It looks like he's running into a dugout, and the Russians launched another shell, which landed right near the dugout, but of course not on it. If a soldier's in a dugout, by and large, they never really get killed or wounded unless if the actual artillery shell lands right on top of it. And we haven't seen that yet. But we did see an artillery shell hit what appears to be ammunition right outside the trench, and that ammunition is now exploding and burning. That shell did hit dead onto the trench, but of course, heavy breaks in the trench, shrapnel didn't travel far, and there was no one there anyways, no injuries or casualties sustained. We now see a couple of Ukrainian soldiers running out of the dugouts that have been shelled almost the entirety of the video, and they're now running into a heavily obscured area of the trench that's in some tree lines. They're now running down even further, and ooh, look at this! Now that's fancy, they actually dug the trench under the train tracks, which we haven't seen that before, and so that's actually pretty neat. And it looks like they actually made a dugout right on the side of the railroad tracks. And of course, Russian artillery is never accurate. That hit near the dugout, but not on it. Those soldiers are safe. And although we don't see them crawling out of the dugout at the end of this video, they were inside of it and taking cover. And so while that shell did land close, the shrapnel did not travel downwards into the trench and into the dugout itself. And so this entire video, we watched the Russians barrage the Ukrainians with multiple shells, and none of them hit in an area that would have actually caused any injuries or death amongst them. And so great to see that the Russians have wasted probably a dozen rounds on film and not managed to get anything out of it rather than a couple of scuffs in the ground. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Donetsk area, well, really the northern Donetsk area near Donetsk city, as we don't really have anything further to report from there. We haven't seen any offensive or defensive actions occurring from either side. We've just seen some minor skirmishes like we saw there on day 138, and that's about all that's happened there. But as we move down towards Mariupol, we have seen that there is a little bit of old footage here with some renewed relevance. And before we move into this, I'm actually going to tell y'all what this is about. This is actually old footage of the BTR-4 ace that used to drive, well, his crew used to drive around Mariupol and destroy the Russians like it was a game of Battlefield 4. It was unbelievable to watch, and it was incredibly impressive. In fact, the man took out 2 Russian main battle tanks with the BTR-4, and we saw that on film as well. Sadly, Konstantin Nikitenko, which is the name of the man who is this tanker ace, was captured when Mariupol surrendered. He was then handed over to the authority of the Donetsk People's Republic, which has since then sentenced Konstantin Nikitenko to death. We're now going to revisit one of his videos from quite a while ago that appears to be new. I didn't see this video when it happened. I do not believe. I don't think it was uploaded then. We saw a lot of them. We saw them take out a BMP-1, a couple of T-72s. We saw them also just driving around the city, but I never saw this one clip where this Russian platoon came rounding around a corner and they lit them up with the gun. And so here's the video, and this is kind of in honor of Konstantin Nikitenko, and also, as a more morbid note, this exact video was actually used as supposed evidence of Konstantin Nikitenko being a war criminal, as they claimed that these were not soldiers, these were civilians, but as you can see, they were clearly soldiers. Here's the video. Now, let's point this out here. These guys, you can kind of see the outline of a rig on his chest, and you can see helmets. Not civilians, those are soldiers. And so with that in mind, now immediately disproving what the DPR said, because those are clearly soldiers of a pro-Russian unit that's rounding a corner, here's a video of Konstantin shredding these poor fools.
Левейше, левейше, ближче, вот за дорогу и сразу тип стрелять. Бачу. Давай. Давай. Ебать, ты... Ебать, ебать,
Oh man, to think that they framed the poor man as a war criminal when he was an absolute beast of a tanker, and they just drove this BTR-4 around town months ago in the Battle of Mariupol like it was Battlefield 4, and we're literally just swiping Russians clean off the map for good and for all. And to think that they've now framed the poor man as a war criminal is honestly an honor, I guess you could say, for him. He did such a good job at wiping out Russians that they meant, hell nor high water, they were going to get him for being an ace. And so hopefully he doesn't get executed. Hopefully some kind of an agreement is made where they can make a prisoner exchange and commute the sentence that they've now given him. But this man was an ace among aces, and I hope that he is remembered after the war, Konstantin Nikitenko, because this man was doing God's work in Mariupol back during that battle. We watched video after video, almost daily. A video was coming out of this man just flooring Russians. I mean, like, this man, the BTR-4 he was in, and the crew that was with him were unstoppable. And so, sadly, of course, he's now a prisoner and now being sentenced to death. But what a guy, and what a story he had. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Mariupol area, and from that bit of unfortunate news, but a pretty funny video considering the context of what the DPR is trying to frame them with, although that's definitely not what was in the video. We're now going to move to the town of Tokmak, where we've seen the HIMARS once again obliterating a Russian ammo dump well behind the lines. As far as I can tell, my front line is inaccurate here. Apparently the front line is near Orikhiv, which is about 20 miles north, but we've never gotten enough video evidence to move it. And of course, y'all know the rule. No video evidence means no frontline changes. And so the front line, as far as I know, is definitely inaccurate, but there's not enough video evidence to be able to change this. Here's the video of the Ukrainians obliterating an ammo depot in Zaporizhia. There's the explosion of the HIMARS missile as it lands in the middle of the city, hitting an ammo dump. We now hear a second HIMARS missile land and explode. And a couple of more hits. It's obviously not an MLRS because the rate of fire isn't high enough, and so I would say this is multiple HIMARS missiles that have been fired towards this ammo dump, and it sounds like all of them hit, so pretty happy to hear that. And hopefully the Russians will be scrounging for scraps here in the Tokmak area soon, as it seems that they're going to be running out of ammo, commanders, and communications lines all over the front. With that, we're now going to move to Novokakhovka, where the same scene was repeated again, and a HIMARS destroyed another ammo depot in Novokakhovka. Here's the video of that ensuing hellstorm, and also, just a PSA to Ukrainian viewers, make sure to not stand near windows when explosions are happening outside. Now, I of course am very happy that people do send in video evidence to everyone around the world for us to see what's going on, but at the same time, you can get heavily wounded doing something like this. When these explosions happen, they are strong enough to bust out your windows, and when they do that, your window becomes pretty much a large hunk of shrapnel that's then going to fly at you. It can sever your arteries in your neck, and you can bleed out and die. Hopefully that didn't happen to this man. We did see the video get uploaded, but still, if you are a Ukrainian watching this stream and you are near a war zone, or if anything happens nearby, make sure to be safe. If you hear an explosion, go and take cover. And so here's the video. See, the pretty big explosion happens, and then his windows are about to get busted out here in a second.
Блядь!
It seemed like the man was okay, and I'm very happy to see that. And it was also great for him, although it wasn't safe. It was wonderful for him to show us the explosion of the Novokakhovka ammo depot. Another ammo depot that the Russians won't be able to get supplies out of, and about the third or fourth one we've seen on film today. So pretty happy with that. We've seen an ammo depot get knocked out in Kharkiv, Luhansk, also at Tokmak, and now Novokakhovka. 4 large ammo depots over the course of the past 24 hours alone. Gotta say, what a record, and the HIMARS is definitely helping out with the Ukrainian, I guess you could say, position in the country, and what an explosion that was. With that, we're now going to be moving beyond the Kherson finger. No news has come out of there today, and we're now going to move down to Kherson city itself, where we've seen the Russian air defenses shoot down multiple Ukrainian rockets or missiles that were flying over the city. I couldn't really tell you exactly what was going on, but we did see the air defenses activated, and it did appear that they were successful in shooting down these Ukrainian projectiles. You see the small explosions happening mid-air, and as far as we could tell, they did take out all of the targets. One of the first times we've ever seen this on film from the Russians, and, you know, of course, every once in a while there would just be a stroke of bad luck with these kinds of things, and sadly, all of these rockets that the Ukrainians fired appear to have been shot down. That doesn't change the situation on the front line, however. The Ukrainians are appearing to ramp up their operations little by little each day in the area, which we'll get to right after this video. with that, that is the end of this video. We're now going to move to the actual frontline situation on the west of the city, where we've seen the Marine brigades, which the Ukrainians have been using only in the Kherson area. And so if you ever see a video anywhere on the internet that says Ukrainian Marines do this, every single one of those videos is coming from the western Kherson area. The 35th and the 36th Marine brigades, which are the only ones on the front line in the entirety of the country, are here. So just letting you know, not their exact positions, not where they are exactly, but they are in this general area. So starting off, we've seen one video of a Ukrainian Marine going for it in a trench. We can see trench warfare is starting to unfold on the outskirts of Kherson, which I'll show you right here in this clip. We can see the man getting a little sip. I guess you could say a famous quote that y'all don't know from Matthew, but he got that drink in his cup. No comment from Matthew. We can now see the Ukrainians firing the RPG into the woods, and we can also see this Ukrainian soldier get on a PKP and also start firing that into the woods as well. Now they're moving down the trench past another soldier. The trenches are quite narrow. It looks like it's a one-way trench. You can only have one group of people in it, and they all need to be moving in the same direction. Not uncommon. Some trenches were like that in World War I, but by and large, the trenches were usually wider. Sadly, the video doesn't have any audio. I do have it on, and we can see them firing into the tree line and trying to reload the gun as quick as possible. And I just want to note this too. A certain group of people. Now, I do admire speed loading. I think that is something really cool. But speed loading is not necessary. Watch this guy as he does a normal reload. It was a fast reload, but it wasn't speed reloading. I think that's always important to note, because there's a group of people here in America who think that to be competent in a firefight, you have to be able to speed load, where you like flip the magazine out and then replace it immediately within like a quarter of a second. While really cool, and I think it is an impressive skill to have, I don't think it's necessary. And I've heard a lot of people say that's necessary, and I think that's just a kind of a silly standpoint. Anyways, we can see the Ukrainians still firing the RPG into the tree line. And I gotta say, they actually did a really good job digging these trenches. They have a lot of breaks in them, a lot of quick and violent turns, a lot of dugouts. It's a good trench, I gotta say. And I just saw Lance say, trenches wide movies for the camera. That's true. That is true. But trenches were also wide in World War I when you look at them by and large through pictures. You had to have at least the front line and main trenches wide enough that people could walk down them in both directions without running into each other. Without that, it would have just been inefficient. We now see a Ukrainian soldier that's apparently gotten a face wound on his cheek. And we can now see the soldier with the camera patching it up. It appears that the soldier might also be in shock, which is unfortunate, but hopefully he can get the medical care he needs. I just wonder how soft Ukrainian dirt is, because whenever we see it on film, it looks like the stuff can pretty much just be dug up clean out of the ground with little effort. And of course I'm saying that sitting here behind a computer. I'm sure it took a lot of effort to dig these trenches if they were dug by hand. But I don't know. I mean, like, usually there's a machine brought in for digging trenches. Even in World War I, machines were used largely to dig trenches. But man, they did a really good job with these. We can now see them having a little bit of a conversation. We see him wiggling around a grenade there for a second, and I think we're about to see him toss it. Yeah, I think he's tossing it. Now they're filming with their cameras, and an explosion happened, and they ducked for a second. Now they're hooking up a claymore. Oh, that's cool. I haven't seen them use that before. And I just saw someone say no targets. Why are they shooting? Well, there are targets in the distance, and usually you rarely ever see your targets. Usually a firefight occurs around 300, 400 yards, and around that distance, people look incredibly small. And so while you can't see them on film, I'm sure they are there. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of film from the Kherson area, where we can then see Ukrainian Marines in a firefight again. This is a different video from a different area, but here is the video. Actually, I think this may be the same video with audio, but let's check it real quick, because it did look similar there at the start, and I just want to make sure that I'm not... Okay, there was an additional 7 seconds of film at the beginning, and that made me think it was different at the start, but apparently we only got one video of the Ukrainian Marines fighting from this area, and I think this one had nothing but music in it. Let me check. Yeah, I'm correct. I do remember this right. So... sadly, that's a repeat video. It had an additional 7 seconds of film at the start, but beyond that, it's pretty much the same. So, with that, we haven't seen any developments on the Kherson front line as of right now. We have seen a little bit of action, as in that firefight, but beyond that, we haven't seen the Ukrainians pushing their offensive yet, and so I think that it will occur within weeks. The Ukrainians, of course, have made it public and have given the citizens of Kherson a amount of time to be able to leave the city before the battle actually begins. And we'll have to see when this Ukrainian offensive begins and how successful it becomes. With that, we're now going to move into the Mykolaiv city area, where we've seen some unfortunate news that more Russian missiles hit the city as of last night. And so, here's the video. Very unfortunate video to see, and it's once again another instance of Russian war crime, as we do know that that missile did not hit any kind of strategic target. If it had hit something associated with the military, there's almost always ammunition associated with rear line support, I guess you could say, facilities. It usually would be some kind of an ammo depot, and even if it wasn't, there's enough military vehicles around to at least cause subsequent fires if it was a strategic area. However, we did not see that. We saw the explosion occur, and the only smoke was from that the remainder of that explosion on the ground. And so it does look like it was another war crime, and once again, that is an assumption at this point, so we will try and collect some more news on it. And so with that, once again, an unfortunate video to see, and more evidence of Russian war crimes, and a great example of why the Russians should be pushed out of Ukraine as fast as possible. With that, we're now going to move into the Black Sea to day 138, where we saw a Russian drilling rig hit. This was very interesting to see, and I'm going to actually have to pull up what a drilling rig is to make sure that I'm correct in what I'm saying. But you can see the Ukrainian missile flying in there. You can then see it hit the drilling rig, and I don't think that rig will be doing any more drilling. It looks like it'll be doing some grilling. And with that, that is the end of this video, but let's pull up what a drilling rig is. I want to make sure that it's not the standard oil rig that I'm thinking about. A drilling rig is an integrated system that drills wells, such as oil or water wells, in the Earth's subsurface. Drilling rigs can be massive structures housing equipment used to drill water wells, oil wells, or natural gas extraction wells, or they can be small enough to be moved manually by one person, and such are called augers. I've used an auger before, but anyways, it is what I was thinking. I was making sure that the name actually meant what it was supposed to mean, but a drilling rig is what the Russians use to create new oil wells. And we can see that they're trying to create an offshore oil rig here, and the Ukrainians are going to ensure that they lose the ability to do that, and also lose the chance to open up an oil rig right in that specific spot. That's actually pretty good news. I don't know how many oil drilling platforms the Russians have. How many oil drilling platforms do the Russians have? Let's pull that up. Mostly we won't be able to get a specific number on that, but you can see a map here showing oil production across the whole of Russia. Interestingly enough, most of it is made in West Siberia near the town of Surgut. The rest of it just appears to largely be coming from West Siberia and also near Tatarstan, which is a pretty decent amount of distance behind Moscow, really close to the Ural Mountains, which sadly puts most of Russia's oil production out of reach of everyone, and it pretty much assures that they'll be able to continue on with military operations in that regard practically indefinitely. Their oil production is one of the largest in the world. But with that, we're now going to, well, actually we're going to take a second to go and look at something that y'all might consider to be a little bit interesting here, is that oil production per country, hopefully we can find a graph for this, but the United States produces a massive amount of oil compared to every other country on Earth. Let me go find this, though. List of countries by oil production. Can we find a graph for this? So that way it's a little bit more interesting to see. Here we go. So you can see, everyone always imagines that the United States doesn't really produce a lot of oil because we're always talking about importing it from other countries. But as you can see here, we actually outpace Saudi Arabia and the Russian Federation just by a little bit, but still, we produce more oil than them. In fact, the Canadians, which we import a large amount of oil from, we import a large amount of raw materials from Canada. They're kind of like what Russia is to China, Canada is to us. But you can still see that they only produce about half of what we make. Iraq produces about the same amount as Canada, but a little less. And then Iran is almost neck and neck with Canada. Really interesting graph here when you look at it. And this is in 2017, and those numbers have increased drastically over the past few years. But still, great to see that we overproduce compared to everyone else, but still, we consume so much oil that we do have to import it from other countries, even at that. But with that, great to see that a first oil drilling platform was wiped out in the Black Sea, and hopefully that's not the last, and hopefully that'll actually impact the Russian economy. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Black Sea and back up to Kyiv, as we've covered all of the news for today. We're now going to cover the speech from President Zelenskyy, and after we cover that speech, we'll then move right into the question segment. And so, without further ado, here's the address from President Zelenskyy here on day 139 of the war.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Сьогодні хочу відзначити одне рішення, яке виглядає нібито технічним, але за ним багато і символізму, і дуже змістовної політичної роботи. Україна стала асоційованим членом спеціальної багатосторонньої програми НАТО щодо технологічної взаємосумісності. Якщо сказати простіше, це про стандарти Альянсу. Україна тепер не лише впроваджує у себе стандарти НАТО, а може брати участь у розробці нових стандартів. Досвід наших військових, можливості українських інституцій, IT-потенціал нашої країни – все це тепер буде українським внеском у розвиток колективної безпеки в Європі. І коли це відбувається на 139-й день повномасштабної війни, якою Росія планувала знищити нас за тиждень. А українська держава не тільки вистояла, не тільки захищається, а ще й розвивається і допомагатиме розвитку партнерів. Такі успіхи варто відзначати. Щодня ми отримуємо і переживаємо багато болісних новин. Війна продовжується, російські обстріли не зупиняються жодного дня. Сьогодні були чергові удари по Миколаєву ракетами, артилерією. Окупанти знову били по Харкову і громадах області. Старий Салтів, Золочів, Байрак та інші. Є жертви, поранені і вбиті. На Донбасі не припиняються спроби штурмів. Ситуація там не стає легшою, а втрати меншими. Треба про це пам'ятати, треба бачити це, звертати увагу. І так само треба пам'ятати, що навіть у таких умовах держава робить кроки вперед у співпраці з партнерами, в інституційному розвитку і, звичайно, на передовій. Окупанти вже дуже добре відчули, що таке сучасна артилерія, і у них не буде безпечного тилу ніде на нашій землі, яку вони окупували. Вони відчули, що операції наших розвідників для захисту своєї батьківщини на порядку сильніші, ніж будь-які їхні спецоперації. Російські солдати, і ми це знаємо з перехоплень їхніх розмов, відверто бояться наших Збройних сил. 139 днів такої війни, майже 20 тижнів, так звана Друга армія світу боїться українців і здатна щось робити тільки на основі бездонних запасів ще старої радянської зброї. Немає більше у них ані стратегічної сили, ані характеру, ані розуміння, що вони взагалі тут роблять на нашій землі. Немає і крихти сміливості, щоб визнати поразку і забрати війська з української території. Сьогодні у Києві провів переговори з Маріушем Блащиком, віце-прем'єр-міністром і міністром оборони Польщі, а він привіз нам краби. Ті, які потужно нагодують нашого ворога вогнем. Звичайно, ключовою темою наших переговорів була подальша оборонна співпраця. Але важливо не тільки те, про що ми говорили, а й те, як ми говорили. Абсолютно впевнено в українському майбутньому, в українському європейському майбутньому. Так само проходять і всі інші мої переговори. Це завжди відчувається. Попереду дійсно важкий шлях. На жаль, інакше неможливо, коли захищаєш свій дім від терористичної навали. Але зрозуміло і те, що попереду успіх нашої держави. Україна зможе захиститись, Україна зможе відбудуватись, Україна зможе реалізувати всі свої зовнішньополітичні цілі. Коли заради цього щиро працюють мільйони людей, кожен і кожна на своєму рівні, результат буде обов'язково. І ви знаєте, я чомусь дуже рідко дякував звичайним людям, які працюють в Україні, які, незважаючи ні на що, залишаються тут, які щодня роблять свою справу з вірою в Україну, з вірою в перемогу. Зараз хочу всім вам подякувати. Дякую, що ви у нас є. Дякую, що ви у України є. Ввечері, як і завжди, підписав указ про нагородження наших героїв. 156 воїнів відзначені державними нагородами, 56 з них посмертно. Вічна слава усім, хто віддав своє життя за Україну. Вічна слава усім, хто бореться за майбутнє для нашого народу. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelenskyy for day 139. Of course, a lot of things to say, and he did praise the normal Ukrainian citizen who's still working at their jobs, which of course was a great thing to see, and they do deserve credit, just like everyone else, because they could have also tried to flee. But with that, that is the end of our news segment for the night. I thank you all so much for watching. If you were here for the news alone, then this is the end of the stream for you. But if you're here for the question segment and the fun that is about to commence here, then strap yourselves in, because we're about to go into the question segment and answer all of the super chats and as many live chat questions as we can, time permitting, of course. But we always make sure to answer at least 3 or 4. And so with that, we are now going to move into our question segment. And what do we have, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a $50 super chat from Trademarks and Patents for Growing Businesses, one of our channel legends, who says, we've seen 9 or 22 ammunition depots destroyed, but the real questions are, number 1, how many does Russia have? And number 2, how easy is it to replace the ammunition depots when destroyed? And number 3, does one depot support 1 BTG, or is there something other ratio?
Well, I thank you so much, Trademarks and Patents, for the support. It's good to have you back around, and I thank you so much for supporting this channel once again. To answer those questions, we're actually going to have a little bit of investigative Googling here, because I don't know the specific ratio of supply depots to BTGs, but I would assume that one supply depot most likely supplies multiple BTGs, although I don't have anything to back that up. How many does Russia have? That's a little hard to assess, because the Ukrainians have to find them first, and so if they knew where all of them were, I'm sure they would start destroying them at a faster pace. So sadly, I don't think there is a set number of how many ammunition depots that they actually have. So I don't think I'll be able to answer that one, because I don't think anyone has an answer to that, although that may be out there. I'm not really sure though. Let's pull it up actually. How many ammo depots do the Russians have? So it looks like everyone's is able to say how many ammunition depots have been destroyed, but no one's really saying how many there are, so I don't think there's a number for that, sadly. But replacing ammunition, I can tell you that it's not incredibly easy. One does have to remember that at the beginning of this war, well, the lead up to the beginning of this war, the Russians had to keep their units on standby at the front lines for months on end to be able to build up the ammunition stores for them to be able to push into the country. And then some of that was also just them waiting for the talks to fall apart. But they had to wait and build up their supplies to be able to conduct this offensive. And we've also seen the Russians grind to a halt once enough supplies have been destroyed, or once their logistics have completely fallen apart, or their front lines have run away from their logistics chains. We have seen that happen, and so we can assume that I guess you could say it would be pretty difficult to resupply the ammunition depots and then subsequently supply the frontline units. Now, the third one, does one depot support one BTG? How much ammo does a BTG need? Let's see. How many troops? How many cars? Well, okay, we know that information. So we're going to move to Rusi.org. And let's see if they have anything interesting to say about this. Let's see, when was this posted? 14th of April. Interesting. History of the battalion. We don't need that. In today's Russia, we don't necessarily need that. This is how a BTG is supposedly supposed to be set up, but we know that most of these little support units to the BTG largely don't exist. But let's see here. Estimation of weapons and vehicles of the 200th Motorized Rifle Brigade. We can see that they have 579 AK-74s, 26 AKS, which are the carbine versions. Then we can see them also using another form of the carbine, the AKS, the A22KS-74U, a bunch of whole other weapons. Those all look like the small arms, by and large. It doesn't look like they had any numbers for the tanks, but logistical aspects. Here we go. This is what we want to read. Semi will likely perform. Is no surprise. This platoon carry, based upon usually consists of support regular maneuver up to 6 days. These platoons can support regular maneuver battalions for up to 6 days. And so a BTG can only operate for about 6 days before it needs to be resupplied. What conditions? But given the relatively small size of a support platoon and the number of transport vehicles, it could be assumed that these conditions would involve light or no combat and little movement. So a BTG, according to what this article is saying, can only survive for 6 days, and that's if it's practically doing nothing. And it has to have a constant stream of supplies to actually be able to do anything. The standard BTG has enough ammunition for 3 expended reload cycles, enough fuel for 2 refueling cycles, and food for up to 10 days. Given these parameters, depending on the severity of combat, a BTG would likely sustain itself in combat for 1 to 3 days before requiring additional logistics support. Oh my god, I didn't know that. That clears up a lot. Y'all may remember that I wrote a large essay, well, it was a short essay really, about Russian logistics at the beginning of the war and how frequent the supplies would have to be and how big the convoys would have to be. And a lot of people said, man, there's not going to be an entire resupply happening every day. It's most likely going to be every other day. But according to this, in heavy combat, which is what all of those units were in at the time and aren't anymore, most of them have paused, it would have been almost every day that they were getting a complete resupply of everything that they needed based off of this article. And so my original logistics calculations were largely correct. And so if y'all would like to revisit that essay, which was written months ago, that gives you a pretty good idea of what Russian logistics at the time were looking like, and it was very bad then. Let's see. But let's find out. Logistics elements. Okay, that's the logistics elements here. And you can see here that it looks like they don't have a lot of Urals. As you can see right there, they only have 5 Euro 4320s, and that's in the motor transport squad. What about the technical support? They have a couple of KAMAZs down here. They have 10 of them in the motor transport squad for the fuel. They also have water and food. They have 1 KAMAS, well, 3 assigned to that. They also have another KAMAS assigned for fuel. It looks like it's an additional motor transport platoon unit. But anyways, let's see. Self-propelled. Carried per weapon system. So we can see that it's actually a kind of okay amount of rounds. But we know that a lot of them don't have Tunguskas, so we can remove that from the equation. Sadly, we don't get an idea of how many ammo depots would be needed to be able to support a BTG, or how many BTGs are supported by a single ammo depot. But based off of the size of the explosions, I would assume that they're probably supporting at least 3 to 5 BTGs apiece. But then again, that's completely an assumption. It's based off of guesswork, and so I would take it with a grain of salt. But I thank you so much for the support, Trademarks and Patents. I hope that did answer a decent amount of the questions you had about the logistics surrounding a BTG. And while we weren't able to get that answer about how many BTGs are supported by a single ammo depot, or the other way around, I hope that we were able to answer the question at least in some way, or at least the other parts. And so with that, thank you once again so much for the support. It does help us out a great deal, and I hope we were able to provide a little bit of an answer to that. And so with that, we are on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from Mr. Dr. Batman. Batman has 2 titles now. He says, a happy belated birthday to Operator Starsky, Slava Ukraine, and Slava Enforcer and Enforcer Matt, and keep up the good work. And thank you, Mr. Dr. Batman. Thank you very much for your support.
And thank you so much once again, Mr. Dr. Batman, for your support, and Slava Ukraini. And also, happy belated birthday to Operator Starsky as well. We did give him some birthday wishes here on stream, and if everything goes according to plan, we will be bringing him back for another Sunday night fundraiser. But we're working on that right now. I haven't gotten a response from him. I think he just woke up a little bit ago, so I think we'll be getting a response soon. But I hope that does address the comment, and thank you once again for the support, and also, once again, Slava Ukraini. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we are paid a visit by none other than Will Riley, also known as Dick Cheney.
Hey!
We haven't seen him in quite a long time, and welcome back. He puts in a $20 super chat and says, Dick Cheney wants to know who Uncle Vulva is in the kids' song. Someone needs to send Putin a harmless Australian brown snake for a pet.
I see you're on the oh, Uncle Vulva is Vladimir Putin. That's apparently his little nickname. Wow, wow, that's sad. Dude, Vladimir Putin literally turned himself into Russian Uncle Sam, or he's trying to. That's sad. But anyways, that's who Uncle Vova is. That does answer the question. I was wondering who that was as well, but I wasn't going to pull that up. I'm glad you answered that question, Will, because we just got the answer to it right there. And I hope that does answer the question. Well, it did. It just flat out answered it. And I hope that he does have a little brown snake sent to him, courtesy of Dick Cheney. And so once again, thank you so much for the support, Will. It's good to have you back, and it's good to have you support the channel, as it helps us out a great deal. And with that, we are on to the next question, and thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and next up, we have another super chat from Dick Cheney, who puts in a $20 donation and says, from the fiery depths of Iowa, Dick Cheney has returned. Where the heck is Geoff?
Well, I thank you once again for the support, Will, and I don't know where Geoff is, sadly. Do you know where Geoff is, Matthew?
I haven't seen him in quite a while. I think he might have stopped watching the streams potentially.
He may have. I'm not really sure. Every once in a while, people do take breaks and then they come back. Narya did cycle in and out for a second. We don't know where Narya's gone again, but hopefully they do return. Because, of course, I look forward to hearing from a lot of our return viewers often. And so, you know, of course, I'm always like, oh, man, you know, like when one leaves, and they are always in the back of my head, like, I wonder if they're going to be back. You know, because sometimes people just do burn out in the war, and I guess they just stop listening. And, you know, that does happen. I can't really blame them for it. But with that, I hope that does answer the question. Sadly, we don't know where Geoff is. But once again, welcome back, Will Riley, to the stream. And if everyone could tell Will, welcome back, I would be highly appreciative of that. because I always love to know that the Lee Spring Army has its veterans and its long-lasting members, and that we always make sure that they are around. And so with that, thank you so much for the support once again, Will, and it's good to have you back. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And moving on, we now have a super chat from Ray P, who puts in a $20 donation and says, what if the Ukrainians made 1,000 blow-up tanks, trucks, and artillery, then placed them around Ukraine in tree lines for the Russians to shoot at? They fooled the Germans in World War II.
That's a great question, Ray, and I think that is actually a pretty good idea. But one thing I think would be a drawback in the modern day for that would be the heat signature, because if the Russians are using an infrared camera, they may never see them in the tree lines. But still, if they're not using infrared and they're just using a normal camera to find them, then that could be a pretty good ruse to do right there. And I don't know if the Ukrainians would have the resources to do something like that. I mean, like, if the World War II era world could do something like that, I know Ukraine can now. And I think that'd actually be a pretty smart ruse to make them waste a whole load of ammunition for nothing in return. And on top of that, we know that the Ukrainians already got Russian blow-up dolls from them, and so they could just blow those back up and then put them inside the tanks, so that way it looks like there's crew members in there. And so that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And it is a pretty cool idea. I think it's a really smart one. But I just wonder if it would stand up against a thermal camera or not. That's something to be seen. But with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, thank you once again for the support, Ray. And we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Captain Chris1220, one of our channel regulars. And he has a pretty simple request. And here it goes. Yeehaw!
Well, I guess I know what the request was. And man, I thought you were the nice guy, man, but you really just a rat piece of shit.
Oh my god.
But anyways, thank you so much for the support. I hope Matthew has made your night. And I thought, I haven't pulled out the Mike Tyson in a bit, and so I thought I would just do that for a minute. And so let me know if y'all enjoyed Mike Tyson. Oh, Matthew, it's back. It's back. It's back, y'all. The Cambot's back. We got one again. And I was just about to say, now that it's reminded me, have any of y'all noticed that we haven't had, knock on wood, let me do that real quick, but we haven't had any DDoS attacks since we fixed the problems. Has anyone noticed that? We had the stream go down from an internet outage that was caused by a storm, and we also had a video game crash the stream. But beyond that, we haven't had any kind of DDoS attacks even throttle our connections anymore, and so I think that the DDoS attackers gave up, because that was a huge problem for a while. We finally fixed it. It happened a couple of times after we fixed it, but then it died off, and we haven't had it happen again. So knock on wood, hopefully it doesn't happen again. But I just noticed, speaking of that Cambot, that those hadn't been back either for a while, but it looks like we had the return of one, and hopefully no one got crabs. And so with that, I hope that kind of addresses the Cambot, which was a celebratory and historic occasion. We had a lot. We had a flavor-packed minute there for a minute, Matthew. You went yeehaw. I spoke in the Mike Tyson voice, and the Cambot returned all at the same time. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question after that crazy minute.
All right, and moving on, up next, we have a question from White Lightning 777, who puts in a $40 donation and says, how exactly are these ammo depots located since the Russians are hiding them in civilian areas out of uniform, a war crime? Isn't there a due care standard to keep civilians away from ordnance?
That is a great question. And the thing is that the Ukrainians usually find the Russian ammo depots by looking for larger buildings and then looking for military activity around them. And you can find the ammo depots because there will always be Russian military vehicles scattered outside of them. And you'll also see a heavy road traffic of these supply trucks coming in and then heading out. Now, I don't know about ammo depots having to be kept away from civilians. That would be a very hard thing to do. And if you notice, for example, if we pull up on Google Maps, let's pull up London, just as a good example. Well, in fact, I'll show two places in Britain, just as a kind of like an example. If you were to have to keep ammunition and, military operations away from civilians, then the British would be in direct violation of that, because the Wellington Barracks is in the middle of one of the most populated areas in London. Not only that, but if you go out, and there is an exception here. These are right near royal residences like Buckingham Palace as well as Windsor Castle. But if we go out to, let me find it. I think it's near Reading, isn't it? No, I think it's, No, Windsor. Yeah, it's near Slough. Sorry. If you go down to Windsor Castle, you'll also see that there is another barracks. Let me find it. Somewhere around here. Oh, man, are you kidding me? Am I not going to be able to find this? Oh, man, let me look. I know I can find this. It's a barracks, and they do the changing of the guard ceremony at Windsor Castle from these barracks. So let's see, we stayed at a hotel here, and then you took a turn. I think it's down this road. Man, there's another barracks in here somewhere. I think this might be it. No. That's a logistics center. In the center of town. I think it might be on this road. Aw, man. I think I'm going to have to give up. Anyways, the story I was about to tell y'all about this place, if I could have found it, is that there is a military barracks in the middle of Windsor town as well, and there's a large civilian population around there, and on top of that, the tourist population adds a lot to the population density in this area on a normal day. And so I would say that there would most likely be a rule against that, but considering that there are a lot of military bases in Europe that are just normally in the middle of a city, I would feel like that's not necessarily the case. But then again, I could be wrong. I'm kind of just working off of what I'm assuming here. But based off of the examples that we can get from Britain alone, I feel like you could largely put military buildings along with ammunition inside of population centers and largely get away with it. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. Someone may actually know about that in the live chat. So if someone does, please answer that for all of us, because I would be interested to know as well. But I hope I did answer that question at least in a pretty good way. White Lightning 777, and thank you so much once again for the support. Also, another thing I would say is that it wouldn't be out of sorts to pretty much have it out of uniform, I guess, per se, to answer that part of the question, because you can't really tell, once again, kind of using Wellington Barracks as an example, you can't tell Wellington Barracks from satellite view, apart from really any other building in London. It kind of just looks like a large office complex. And I've actually looked at it before, and it pretty much is. It's just a giant office building that has beds in it for soldiers. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in every regard, and I thank you once again for the support, White Lightning 777, because of course it helps out this channel a lot, and we do appreciate our longtime supporters that help us to keep these shows running. And with that, we are on to the next question, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a super chat from Lance Montgomery, who puts in a 1776 donation and says, Russian gear appears as battlefield effective as Acme rocket skates. Will Western weapons makers see an uptick in global clients with Russian-made systems shown being worthless?
I don't think that would be the case, because one thing that is always a fact and a case of the matter when talking about East versus West weapons is that it's pretty much been known ever since the fall of the Soviet Union that Russian equipment is far worse than Western equipment. But the problem is that some countries may be blacklisted from Western's arms markets, and on top of that, some countries, usually the ones that are blacklisted, are also incredibly poor, and so they have only one option, and that's that Eastern equipment. It's cheap and it's available, and so a lot of countries will still pick it over Western equipment, which is far superior, but it does come with a price tag that reflects that. So in that regard, also, I love the thing that you said about the Acme skates. We'll get to that in a second, but I don't think that Russian equipment will die off in terms of the arms trade. A lot of countries out there are incredibly poor, and they just need a large amount of weapons, regardless of the quality, and so that cheap price will shoehorn them in as the, I guess you could say, the pick of choice. One interesting thing, though, is that the United Arab Emirates, which is a fairly wealthy country these days, did pick the BMP-3 in trials over the M3 Bradley, as well as the Warrior infantry fighting vehicle that the British use, and I think they're probably regretting that decision now, considering that they've watched BMP-3s get obliterated all over the place in Ukraine, and now they own several hundred of them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, but by and large, I don't think that Russian arms will ever leave the market, just because they're so cheap. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have yet another super chat from Will Riley, who puts in another $20 donation and says, Dick Cheney would love for you to do a video of the Russian 2nd Pacific Squadron on their travels to take back Port Arthur. If you enjoy Russian ineptness, it doesn't get any better than that.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Will Riley, and that is a great that's a great historical story. For those of y'all who don't know, the Russian fleet tried to sail, and the Russian fleet was incredibly inexperienced at the time, just for y'all to know. But it tried to sail all the way from, I believe, St. Petersburg or Sevastopol. I forgot their port of origin, but they tried to sail all the way around the world to where Japan was at the time. I believe that was during the Russo-Japanese War, to try and relieve poor Arthur. And they got obliterated in the end because they were so incompetent. But in the meantime, they took on pet alligators, pet crocodiles. There was a whole bunch of disciplinary issues. It was literally a raw story from end to end of Russian incompetence and ineptitude, even then during Russian imperial times, which hasn't really changed. But that is a great idea for a video, Will Riley, and if we start to touch on history videos in the future, I think that will be one of them. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, Will, and the great idea, because once you said poor Arthur in that whole entire story, I was like, oh man, that would be a really good one for sure. And so with that, I hope that does address the question. Hopefully one will be up in the future. No guarantees as of the moment on that, but I will see about it. And with that, we are on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support, Will.
And next up, we have a $16 super chat from James Nyland, who says, the bottom right buttons spell newt.
Newt. I know exactly what he's talking about, Matthew. Let's go back to
that. He's talking about Pengu.
Yeah, he's talking about Pengu. And that's become a meme these days. But yeah, Matthew, it does look like it. Look, hang on. Let me get on the screen itself and fast forward a little bit. Let me get in. Right there.
It does.
Yeah, it
really does.
It's like the little snout's expanded in the first one. He's going, newt, newt. Yeah, that's the newt button. And so if we ever see that again, we're going to call that the newt button. Thank you so much for the support. And also thank you so much for the smart idea of what the world this is. That's the newt button now. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And thank you so much for the support and for the genius naming strategy there. That's perfect. And so with that, we are on to the next question, and
up next, we have a $10 super chat from JK, who says, Bayraktar.
And JK, all I have to say in response to that is, Bayraktar. I don't know how to sing in Ukrainian. We're going to work on that eventually. Maybe I'll drop a Bayraktar version that we make. But I have no editing skills in terms of music, and I would probably sound terrible on top of that. But with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does kind of answer the question. And Bayraktar. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Winston Segner, who says, thank you for your hard work and all you and your brother do. And Winston, thank you for your support, and thank you for watching forever.
And thank you so much for, once again, Winston, like Matthew said, for watching since the beginning of time, because I think at this point, this stream's been running longer than Queen Elizabeth has been alive, it seems. At least in my head. It feels like I've never lived a life outside of this. But I thank you so much for the support and everything that y'all have done to hit the like button on this channel and support us to keep it running. I've got to say it again. The only way, and of course, just a little bit of tooting our own whistle, all of our videos that we still have monetization rights on that we haven't been copyrighted for are ad-free. And we always do that because I find it incredibly annoying that people have to go through double ads these days to watch a video. It's almost like watching mainstream TV that way in that regard. And I remember the days when YouTube was almost ad-free, and those were the good days. And I'm going to keep this whole entire channel ad-free. Either we're going to be getting from normal videos sponsorships to support them, or we're going to be getting support from our viewers in live chats on streams to be able to keep running this channel. If I ever have to start running ads, like normal ads that are run through Google AdSense, I'm not going to be incredibly happy with that, and I'm not going to like that one bit. And so I want to make sure that we do not have to do that ever. And so I thank you all so much for the support. That helps us to keep on being able to do that. And as long as we're able to get that support, the channel can keep running. And so I thank you once again for everything that you've done. Because, you know, while you're thanking me for everything I've done, I've got to thank you for everything you've done, because that support literally keeps us running. And so thank you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Redwood Beard, who says, Enforcer, didn't you hear over fireworks still going on? And no, not in Ukraine. My question is, do you think the jets for Ukraine are a spontaneous decision or one that has been thought about?
The jets are definitely one that's been thought about, because we've seen ever since the start of the war, countries have been trying to find a way to send them over without getting into serious troubles and repercussions. And so I think that the whole entire MiG-29 and Su-25 deal that Slovakia and Bulgaria has made has been heavily thought out, because they already had replacements lined up immediately as soon as they were handing them over. As soon as Slovakia announced that they were being sent, they said, we've already lined up a deal to get F-16 Block 70s from the United States to replace them. And so in that regard, I do think it's been thought out a lot, because they already had replacements lined up, and also a plan with the Czech Republic, which is now called Czechia. I don't know how that's pronounced, but they also had a plan with the Czech Republic where they'll get air cover and air support from them until they get those replacement jets. So I do think that they've had that planned out for quite some while. And so with that, once again, that's an assumption on my end based off of what we're seeing, and that seems to be the most logical and common sense thing. But take it with a grain of salt, because just because I think it's logical and common sense does not mean it may be true. But with that, I hope that did answer the question, and I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Junebug with the 72 on the end, who says, glad you two are here tonight. So much news. Thank you, and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support, Junebug72. And we always try and make sure that there is good and interesting news up on our streams. And I thank you so much for being around forever and enjoying them. And I hope that we'll be able to keep covering this news until the very end of this war, and make sure that everyone's here for the Victory Day that will hopefully be coming within this year. I'm not sure if it will. I think that this may go on for quite some while, but hopefully by the end of this year, we'll be seeing a Victory Day. And so thank you so much once again for the support, Junebug72. It helps us out a load, and I am very happy that everyone appreciates these streams so much. It helps us to keep going, knowing that people like them, and of course, with y'all support, we can always make sure that they keep on going. And with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from BL Parak, who says, statement, the Duran channel has to be a Russian op. The symbol of their channel is a two-headed eagle.
Let's pull that up. What's the name of that channel?
It's the Duran channel.
Duran. Hey, look. There's a nice stream from the Enforcer that's got 4.6 thousand people watching. Cool. Let's go to Duran. The Duran.
All right, Alexander, let's talk about the state of the world economy, of the global economy.
Interesting. Let's see what their about page says. Oh boy.
Crypto.
They're into crypto. Oh boy.
Bad sign.
That's bad. Yeah. I just want y'all to know I'm not a big fan of crypto. Never really have been, but you know, that's just me. But anyways, Duran.
All right, Alexander,
I'm trying to figure out what they're about. Lavrov scolds G7 leaders. Putin's speech signals the... Let's see this title here, because the Wordish will tell us a lot about this. Signals the end of Okay, yeah. Russian psyop right here. Neoliberal world order. They don't really give a good description. Oh my god, look how many links they have, man. Jesus.
That is insane.
That's crazy. Oh, now we got an ad running. Look at this, y'all. This is why I don't like this stuff. I literally had the video paused, and look what happened. An ad starts running on the guy's video. I don't like that. Let's see. I don't know. I mean, like, maybe I'm judging them off of one video title. I haven't watched a video. Maybe they are pro-Ukrainian. I don't know. But
there's a video right there that says Vladimir Putin crushes George Soros. So clearly biased toward Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, kind of biased in a way that's pretty sad. I actually don't know how he's still on YouTube, but you know, let's see how many subscribers he's gotten. Oh, he's actually gotten a little bit more than us over the past month. Huh. Anyways, yeah, I actually have a thing called TubeBuddy, installed, which shows me the analytics of my channel versus someone else's. And he has, and now this is actually an interesting figure. I have 85,000 subscribers right now. He has 257,000, and we're almost neck and neck with him on viewership over the past month, which kind of tells you how many people buy into this garbage. Anyways, I hope that kind of addresses the question. It does look like he's a pro-Russian shill. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Ecom Ikpat, who says, Russians fire 60,000 rounds a day, which wears out their barrels. Do they have spares? Because the accuracy of said guns are not going to be good, but Russian gunnery isn't the best either.
Of course, I would assure you that they definitely do have spare barrels. Almost always when artillery pieces are made, there's always a factory making spare barrels on the side, because it's almost known that they will need to be replaced eventually. So in that regard, yes, they do have spare barrels, but I don't know how many they have and how often those replacements may occur. There may be a lot of worn out guns out there that are still being used by the Russians that are firing at the Ukrainians, and that may be the reason why we see Russian artillery so far off the mark sometimes, is that they're using worn out barrels. And so with that, I hope that kind of does answer the question. But once again, once we enter those kinds of detailed groundwork areas, like the nitty-gritty side of logistics, there's not a lot known on either side about that kind of stuff publicly. So sadly, I can't answer that question with a lot of certainty, but I hope I was able to answer that, and at least it gave some kind of a new aspect on it. But then again, that's all assumptions on my end, by and large, just based off of what is common sense and what usually occurs. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are moving on to the next one.
And next up, we've got a $10 super chat from WL, who sends us a super sticker of the Dancing Doge, saying thank you.
The Dancing Joe.
Dancing Joe.
But I thank you so much for the support, and we do love the little dancing Doge. The Doges are cute, and I think that, well, that's why they're on YouTube. They're a meme, you know. Should we indulge in the Doge? There it is. It's the Doge. The Dogecoin's actually been going up a little bit, but let's see. Oh no, it's been going down. Yeah, that's kind of sad.
Into a sad.
Oh wait a minute, they've really been going down. I mean, they have dropped to like, oh my god, they just keep on dropping. Dang. Wow, they really didn't. I guess they. Oh yeah, they were worthless forever, but they almost went up to being worth a $0.50 for a day, but you know, right after that, it looks like they fell off. But kind of sad. It looks like the Dogecoins kind of died, but hey, you know, Doges are cool. They even have a Doge loaf. But anyways, enough about the Doge. I thank you very much for the support. Of course, we love the little super stickers with the Doges on them. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, my sandwich had a bomb inside. I think I might have explosive diarrhea. Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, Blue Flam. But just to let you know, if you have explosive diarrhea, there was no bomb inside that sandwich. Apparently, you were eating Taco Bell disguised as a sandwich. But I do thank you so much for the support. Of course, I'm just kidding around. I hope you kind of get through that. Explosive diarrhea is some pretty rough stuff, and hopefully the stream is helping to take your mind off of that while you're trying to deal with that. But I thank you so much for the support, Blue Flame. I hope I did address that comment fairly well for you, and thank you once again for the support. It helps out our channel a huge deal. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Tarax G, who says, Enforcer, did you see the intelligence report from the area the HIMARS hit? They are terrified now that the AA equipment they have was supposed to be able to stop the HIMARS, but I guess not.
I haven't seen that report, but I have heard of a Russian Twitter user who's still on Twitter at this moment, and he said something along the lines of the HIMARS has hit like 12 ammunition depots, communication centers, and logistics hubs. No, I'm sorry. Command centers over the past week, and this is getting incredibly concerning. And of course, they made it a spin where they attacked the West for giving them to Ukraine. But I did hear that guy say something about it, and he's a pro-Russian guy, and it's showing that the HIMARS is doing a massive load of damage. In fact, it may be the thing that turns the war around for Ukraine permanently if they continue to use them and they suffer very little or no losses of those MLRSs. And I know that someone's about to say they're not an MLRS, but If you look at them, they're pretty much an MLRS. In fact, let's go to Wikipedia, the most trusty news network there is. A multiple rocket launcher. And you can see an image of an Uragan right there, which is an MLRS. And so it is an MLRS by design, by definition. So I hope that does answer the question. It'll also answer something on my end, so that way I can make sure I'm saying something correctly. But I did see a Russian Twitter user talking about it, but I haven't seen an official report from that area. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and we are moving on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Eduardo Gonzalez, who says the Orc leader is trying to buy armed drones from Iran, the Shahid 129, I believe. To me, it seems they want to use those to target the HIMARS with this weapon. What is your opinion? And Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini. And to answer that question, what's the name of that drone? The Shahid?
Shahid 129.
Shahid 129. I misspelled it. It was an E, not an I. But still, that looks a lot like an American drone to me. That looks a lot like a freaking Predator. Doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah, it looks just like one. It looks like it's using the same missiles as well. Well,
it's just rebranded.
Yeah, and look at the pick monkey job they did on that banner back there. That looks like something that someone would throw together for $5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Second generation Shahid 129. Its first flight was in spring 2012. It's in service and in production, but they don't have any number. Well, actually, 22 to 40 of them have been produced as of 2017. But what kind of weapons can it use? Let's see. Cruise speed, combat range. It can travel 1,100 miles, so it can pretty much cover the whole length of Ukraine on a one-way trip, I believe. It can fly for 24 hours, and it has a maximum service ceiling of 24,000 feet. It can use Sadids. Well, they like to really call everything with a saw over there, don't they? But apparently they're precision-guided munitions, but we don't know a lot about them, like their range. So let's see their range, and that'll give us an idea. What the diameter... The bomb has a range of 6 kilometers. 6 kilometers. I'm sorry, but 6 kilometers to miles. Not far at all. That's 3.7 mile range. And so if a HIMARS is well behind the lines, like 20 miles behind the lines, that thing has to fly over 16 miles of Ukrainian-controlled territory and through probably a massive air defense net to get to the HIMARS to then try and drop a guided bomb on it and destroy it. So based off of the figures, it would be highly unlikely that these things could be used to attack the HIMARS, but it could be used to attack Ukrainian frontline units regularly. That's something that I could see them doing. But I don't think they'd be able to attack the HIMARS. Once again, that's just my opinion, and I can be wrong. You know, there's always the chance whenever I give a statement that they can be wrong, so take it with a grain of salt. But I don't think these things would be effective at attacking a HIMARS. I think to do that, you would pretty much have to be using some of Russia's best tech right now in terms of guided weaponry to be able to try and hit them. And you'd have to be firing from around 25 or 50 miles away to even have a shot at it, considering the air defenses. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you once again for the support. And once again, take it with a grain of salt. But with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Laszlo Uriel, who says, how about a refresher on where the Russia/Ukraine borders were 2014 versus February 24th versus front lines at this point? And how are they depicted by your map lines as red, black, purple, etc.? Here I am, Slava.
And thank you so much for the support, and Slava Ukraini. And to answer that question, the purple lines show Ukraine's original borders, and it also shows the shared front line in between Russia and Ukraine if it was to become a member of NATO, which is actually 919 miles long. Pretty neat, actually. But beyond that, the black lines actually show the Donetsk and Luhansk republics as they existed pre-war, pre-February 24th, and the red lines show where the front line is today. So I hope that kind of answers the question. The purple line shows Ukrainians' actual sovereign borders. The black line shows the breakaway regions of Donetsk and Luhansk. They existed pre-war. And then the red lines show the current front lines as of right now. I think there's actually a description to all that here in this legend that I wrote up here in the top left corner. And you can find this map and the link in the description below and see everything about it there. And so I hope that does answer the question about the borders and how they looked during certain times historically before the war and during the war. And with that, we are on to the next question. And thank you once again for the support, and I hope that cleared that up pretty well.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Super Creech, who says, if you could send Putin to the gallows, what would Enforcer Matt and yours choice be of the way of his meeting the devil, Slava Ukraine? Well, Super Creech, first of all, Putin would probably be shaking his own hand because he is the devil. And honestly, that's kind of a tough one to answer. I'm not really sure.
I would say that if I had to give him a way out, I would say probably hanging, and make sure that the rope isn't the proper length. That's probably the way I would go. But that, I don't really want to get into that too much because I don't know if that's violating YouTube's community guidelines or anything. But I hope that does kind of answer the question, at least in a way. And I think Matthew kind of gave the sentiments that we both have about Putin in the first part. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that did answer the question a little bit. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, I want to recognize a $10 super chat from Grandpa J, who does not leave a comment. But Grandpa J, I saw you leaving some very kind words down there in the live chat, and we appreciate you very much and your support of the channel. And moving on, we have a $6 super chat from Murray Sutherland, who says, would the correct term for the mother lovers be Madame Bushka?
Oh, I get what he's saying. Thank you very much for the support, and in the sake of not going into that too much, yes, I would agree. But with that, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that answers that question, which is pretty on the nose there. But with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Zach Jeffers, one of our Discord mods, who says, Putin is just getting loonier by the weeks in Slava Ukraine.
Slava Ukraini. And I would entirely agree that he is getting crazier by the week, and it seems like he's getting crazier because he's trying to cope with the reality that they're not doing well. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and thank you so much once again for the support, Zach Jeffers. It helps us out a great deal, and we're always appreciative for it. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $25 donation from Peter Jalowenko, who says, thanks, Enforcer and Enforcer Matt. I love your work. Please plug the rally in Canberra, Australia, this Saturday outside the Russian embassy to mark the downing of the MH17 and to stop the war. Search Call to Action National Rally Canberra, FB.
And thank you so much for the support, Peter. And I guess you're from the land down under, eh? And of course, we have a lot of viewers from Australia and New Zealand. Incredible countries filled with very nice people, and also really interesting landscapes and animals and such. Of course, Australia is known for their animals, but moving beyond that, I will make sure to try and include that on Saturday's stream. I'm actually going to make sure to make a note of that on my phone, so everyone just give me a second while I write down a reminder, because I don't want to forget on that one. Make sure to include MH, not my, MH17, downing, and what's this called? Rally in Canberra on Saturday. And I'll set that reminder for the midday on Saturday, so that way it shows up right at the right time. Right there. There we go. And so I put that down as a reminder, Peter, and I thank you so much for the support. And I hope that does address the question in a way. We're going to make sure to cover that one for sure. And also another thing, just to speak quickly about Australia, there are a lot of people who are from Australia that watch this stream. I don't know what time it is over there, but I feel like this is like the opportune viewing time for the Australians, because it's like, I don't know, I guess it's like the midday to afternoon for y'all. But still, it's really cool to know that a lot of y'all are on here, and I thank y'all all so much for the support and continuing to be interested in the war news. It seems like there's a lot of Australians and New Zealanders who are interested in that, and of course that Anzac heritage and that fighting spirit lives on to this day. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address the question, and with that, we're on to the next one, eh? Oh, well, actually, that was kind of British. Anyways, we're on to the next one, and thank you once again.
All right, and up next, we have two super chats of $5 each from viewer I Don't Know 1124 and Ragnar the Great, who says, I love the streams and keep it up.
And I thank you so much, Ragnarok. Is that correct?
Ragnar the Great.
I thought that was Ragnarok, but thank you so much for the support, Ragnar, and we are going to try and keep going the best we can. And of course, thank you so much for the support in both ways. It helps us to always keep going, and we're always appreciative to everyone who helps us out. And so thank you once again for the support, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have another super chat from Ecom Ikpat, who puts in another $5 donation and says, the HIMARS crew is cracked. They're probably taking shifts night and day, shooting at Russians driving from front line to front line, and there's just 4 of them.
That's true. There's only 4 of them, and I've seen that the attacks have been pretty spread out, and so I don't know if they're putting one in each crucial area of the front line or not, but it is something interesting to note for sure. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support, and I bet they are cracked, man, or busted, one or the other. But with that, I hope that answers the question. I would agree. Those poor guys seem like they're probably being run ragged, but they are literally changing the war as we speak. And so with that, thank you once again. I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Kith Can, who says, besides getting really lucky with a TB-2, seeing and shooting at a surfacing sub, what tactics or weapons does Ukraine have to keep Russian subs in port? Thanks for the stream tonight.
And thank you so much, Kith Can, for enjoying the stream tonight. Of course, it's always a high honor to hear people appreciate it, because y'all could go watch anyone else's stream, but y'all chose this one. And so thank you so much once again. And to answer that question, I don't think the Ukrainians have any way to keep Russian subs at port rather than a lucky hit with the Bayraktar. As far as I know, they don't have any kind of anti-submarine warfare weapons, or a large amount of them. And so sadly, I don't think there is any way to keep them at bay, and hopefully some Western countries can look into trying to provide them with a way to keep Russian submarines at home at Sevastopol. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. It is a brief answer, but I don't think there's a lot to add to it. They just lack the ability and need to get it from someone out there somewhere. But once again, thank you so much for the support, Kith Can. You know, I could actually say that with a Mike Tyson accent and get away with it. Hey, hey, thank you so much for the support, Kith Can. And with that, we're moving on to the next question. Yeah, because I'm the best in the world, the best that ever is, the heavyweight champion. All right, on to the next one.
All right. And just for everybody to know, we have just 8 super chats left until we move on to our live chat questions. So if you're looking to have your question answered, stick around, and there's a possibility we might get to it. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Havlin Tuff, who says, I wonder what would happen if the U.S. put the bill of sale for Alaska on the front door of the Moscow embassy.
That's a great idea. I think the Russians would honestly just pretend like they never agreed to that. I'm sure in Russian schools they teach that the United States greedily took it. Well, no, let me think of an actual Soviet way of teaching that. The greedy American capitalists, back when Russia was run by greedy Russian capitalists, signed a sick deal to try and bring the Freemasons and, let's see, who else would be the evil people at the time? The Freemasons and the Illuminati. Yeah, because the Illuminati is always the magic people in the background. The Illuminati into the world order by selling Alaska off to those greedy Americans, and it's actually ours, and it was taken from us by greedy Russians. I'm sure that's how they actually teach it in school. They're actually in some Mexican schools, from what I've heard, they actually teach about the lost territories, which include Texas, California, and a couple of other states. Of course, very rarely. I don't think that's normal Mexican school curriculum down there, but I have heard about it a little bit, which is interesting. But with that, I hope that kind of answers the question in a way. And I think if we put that up there, they would just be completely flabbergasted that a bill of sale actually existed, or they would have been told a lie about how it existed in the first place. But with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Martin Nielsen, who says, Dear Enforcer, do you think Putin more and more looks like a dead blobfish? There's something about eyes, if you ask me. And good morning from wonderful Copenhagen in wonderful NATO.
And thank you so much for the support. And I have to say, Putin does look a lot like a blobfish. I actually got in trouble in school one time for calling someone a blobfish. They were pretty mean to me, and so I got back at them during a school presentation. I said, you know, blah, 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 and the blobfish, kind of like how you look. And that was like the first time I had ever said anything mean in school to anyone, and it shocked everyone. But I still remember that to this day, because that's why blobfish stick in my mind. I don't know how that person is doing these days. I think they're actually doing pretty okay. But anyways, this is a blobfish, as you can see.
That is an ugly creature.
Yeah, just like Vladimir. They actually look different underwater. They actually look like this. And it's because they're so deep underwater that the pressure actually keeps them in a normal shape. But once you pull them out of the depths of the sea, the pressure difference is so bad that they pretty much swell and die. And that's why they look like this when they get brought up. But yeah, that does look a lot like Putin. Let's pull him up. I think that might actually be a picture of Putin once he takes off the makeup, because I'm sure that they were putting a lot of makeup on him to make him look like this. And so, spit an image, actually. Actually, this one's about the closest they get, really. Yeah.
Look at that stuffed blobfish over there.
Which
Did you
one?
see that?
This one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What in the world is that?
This thing would give me nightmares if I was a kid and I got this thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's rough. Anyways, with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Preston Ringrose, who says, when are the next Russian elections?
Really, I don't know when. Let's pull them up. Next Russian election. That's if you can call them an election, but the next one, will be in 2024. Interesting. Next elections in 2024. Who's the opposition here? United Russia. I think that's actually Putin's party. United Russia. Yeah, that's Putin's party. Let's see here. Independent. Actually, apparently Putin's an independent. Let's check that out real quick. President of Russia. I don't see anything about him being an independent here, at least under the listing on Wikipedia. But yeah, I mean, like, I guess he would be an independent. He kind of kills off his political opponents regardless of who they are. But, and that's when the next election is 2024. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Enforcer for President, who says, what law are you and Matt planning to practice? And I will say that at the moment, I am looking to practice in personal injury and also criminal defense. I've considered maybe doing family law one day, but I just can't bring myself to do it. I'm just not a big fan of everything that comes with that field, but that's what I'm leaning toward at the moment.
And also to answer that question, I'm pretty much the same as Matthew, but I'm okay with family law. It's, it's just, it doesn't really bother me all too much. But with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I'm sorry that we're kind of picking up the pace here, but I do want to make sure that we kind of keep to a smaller stream. It's about to go into marathon length, kind of like we used to do on normal. And it does wear us out very badly if we go marathon length. So we're going to pick up the pace a little bit, but I hope we did answer that question fairly well. And thank you once again for the support, Enforcer for President. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Mr. Diggs, who says, aren't the numbers and math always against Ukraine? If Russia is pushed back, what can be done at the Ukrainian border, craters, or a wall? And thank you, guys.
And thank you so much for the support. It does help us out a lot to continue going on. And to answer that question, if they push the Russians back to the border, the war would pretty much end. The Ukrainians wouldn't want to go on the offensive. That would be too costly. And at the same time, if the Russians got pushed all the way back, there's no hope of them ever winning. And so they would most likely start to try and create some kind of peace agreement at that point to try and end the war as a white peace and just keep everything status quo, or maybe even give up a couple of things like Donetsk and Luhansk. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way. And I also thank you very much for the support. And with that, also to answer, I think it would be craters, because if the Russians didn't give up even being pushed back to the border, the Ukrainians wouldn't build a wall. That would be largely ineffective. They would just bombard the Russians on the other side of the border while not actually crossing it. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question that time. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Zyper Sniper 1, who says, if Russia asks Iran for drones, those that mean that Russia is getting low on drones, question mark.
That may mean that, or it may mean that they don't have the ability anymore to produce modern and advanced drones that may be more capable than the ones they have, and so they have to reach out to other countries to try and fill that gap that they can't do themselves. It could be one or the other. I'm not really leaning towards either one. Both of them could be valid answers to the situation, but by and large, I would feel like it's probably a sanction issue that they don't have the technology or the ability to produce those kinds of drones, and so they're having to reach out and ask for some from other countries that are a little sympathetic to their cause. With that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, it is time to recognize a few donations that were left without comments. Up first, we have a $5 super chat from Blackhawk NZ. Then we have a $4 donation from Rob Scott and a $2 donation from Merwin. So thank you very much to all three of you for your support, and thank you for watching the channel. And up next, we have a $5 super chat from Edgy Number 1, who says, do you agree that Russian state subversion has stoked culture wars and extremes in the USA? Reference Vladislav Surkov.
I would say that's kind of weighing in on the American political situation a little bit too much for my tastes, actually. So I think I'm actually going to have to step back from that one and not answer it, because getting into that could start getting really deep into American politics and the situation here right now. And so sadly, I think that's going to break my no politics rule. I would like to answer that question. That might be something I'll try and answer at another time. But right now, I think that would just be touching on it a little bit too much. But I thank you very much for the support. I'm sorry I can't answer the question, but I do hope you understand that I'm trying to keep things as non-political as possible here on this channel, especially when it pertains to America. Because regardless of however I try and comment on that, even if I try and keep it neutral, it's definitely going to go political and not end well. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next we have a $3 super chat from Canuck Bro, who says, do you think the West could endure the same casualties as Ukraine? I mean, if U.S. lost 200 soldiers per day.
Yes, we certainly could. The United States has a population of 330 million people, really 360 million now. And if we do the math, forgetting the population number, if we lost 200 a day for 139 days, we would have lost around 27,800 soldiers. And that's just going off of a, I guess you could call it a current figure. I mean, like that could vary a lot from day to day. But if it was just 200 set every single day and we lost 27,000 men, that's not bad. That's kind of getting close to World War II figures. But at the same time, if we were in a major war, it wouldn't be that bad. And so with that, I thank you very much once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and this is our second to last super chat of the night, which goes to Detroit Micro Sound, who puts in a $2 donation and says, HIMARS plus NASAMS equals job done.
That's true. And I would agree with that. If the HIMARS get protection from the surface-to-air missile batteries, then they're pretty much impervious to attack. Well, you know, of course, you can always make it through air defenses every once in a while, but by and large, they would be impervious to attack. And I think that's kind of the system that the Ukrainians are working with right now. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this is our last super chat of the night until we move on to our live chat questions. This one goes to Kevin Scott 76, who puts in a $2 donation and says, my friend in Anchorage is worried about invasion.
Oh, I would tell them not to worry at all. Because the thing is that the U.S. Navy is the strongest in the world, and the Russians would never be able to make it to Anchorage in the first place to do anything before the U.S. Navy stopped them way out in the Bering Sea or in the North Pacific. The Russians would not stand a chance. And so if they tried to invade, they would be invading pretty much the empty, barren wastes of Alaska where really no one lives. You know, of course, there's a few towns in Alaska like Nome. Nome's incredibly famous. I believe Nome is where most of the deadliest catch people work out of, isn't it?
I believe so.
Yeah, so, you know, it's like right in the middle of the Bering Sea, but beyond that, there's nothing in Alaska up there. They would be invading a hostile land filled with no modern infrastructure that would almost be impossible to supply and maintain a full modern army in. And so they would have to try and go around the Aleutian Islands to Anchorage, and that would pose so many problems in its own right that it might as well be impossible. So I would tell them not to fret. Of course, the American military is on top of things, if anyone is. And I think that they would be able to stop anything that the Russians would pull off well before they got here. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you so much once again for the support. And I just saw someone say, Daniel Simpkins, I just want to answer this one. Has America ever won a war on its own? And yes, we won the Mexican-American War. We also won the Spanish-American War as two separate examples of us winning a war entirely on our own. But with that, we're now going to move from the super chats into the live chat questions. We're going to answer as many of them as we can. It's probably not going to be a lot, probably around 5 or 7. But I'm going to try and answer more than 3, although we're going over time. And so with that, we're on to the live chat questions.
All right, and first up from the live chat, we have a question from Lancashire Heathen, who says, Enforcer, is there any way of pursuing Russian war criminals after Ukraine wins?
Sadly, not really. If Russia still exists as a country and they're just there, there's really no way for us to go after them. We can't just walk into Russia and start arresting Russian citizens, because we really wouldn't have a way to do that without the Russians immediately responding to it. So sadly, the answer to that is no. Also, I just saw someone say, Vitaly said, real quick, I want to cover this one. Vitaly said, Revolutionary War, bro. I hate to say it, America didn't win that one. The French pretty much won it for us. You know, that's kind of a whole thing. I would highly suggest reading about it. But if you ever look at the Battle of Yorktown, let's pull up the painting. Battle of Yorktown. And let me show you a painting. Well, the Siege of Yorktown is a better way to put it. Let me see if I can actually... Oh, here we go. When you look at this portrait, these, I believe, are the French, if I'm correct. The British are here in the middle, and then the Americans over here on the side. And you see here in the portrait... Yes, those are definitely French, because the soldiers here, the foot soldiers, are wearing white uniforms. And you see here that the French are well displayed, and the French played a heavy part in the United States winning the Revolutionary War. If it wasn't for the French, we may have actually lost. And that's why France and America have this special relationship in a way, because they're pretty much the reason we exist. So I hope that kind of addresses that real quick, because it's a war we didn't win on our own. So with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a question from the Beezer, who says, do you think that Russia will claim white phosphorus has only been used as a marker and concealment?
Yes, they will definitely claim that. The Russians always claim things that make it legal, but at the same time, you can clearly see from the video evidence of the incident that it's certainly not being used as a marker. It's certainly being used as a incendiary munition. And that's where it would fall apart, because while they can technically claim something, the evidence of what happened shows a completely different story. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, we have a question from Robert Massey III, who says, do you know how the Russians knew the BTR ace in Mariupol, who he was after capture? His face was never on screen.
They may have figured out who he was by torturing them and asking who was the guy, the BTR guy on the film, and maybe someone ratted on him or he ratted on himself. And then after that, they found out who he was, and then they held him, you know, supposedly accountable for being an ace and killing so many Russians. So I hope that kind of answers the question, because while his face wasn't on camera, there are ways of finding out who someone is, you know, if you see what I'm saying. But with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a question from Nisto21, who says, have you seen New York City's public service announcement about nuclear message to its citizens?
I have not seen that. That's not entirely new. That's something that has happened throughout history. But of course, they may just be doing that to make sure people are prepared. But I haven't heard about that personally. So I hope that kind of does answer the question, at least in brief. And with that, we're on to the next one. And I'm sorry if I'm kind of going through these incredibly fast, but I want to try and get to as many questions as possible, so it's kind of like a lightning round for me. So sorry for that if it's not a long answer, but I want to answer as many as possible. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a question from Benny Jerzerit, who says, when are we giving Ukraine fighter jets? Very helpful for threatening Belashenko.
Sadly, I don't think we'll be giving Ukraine any fighter jets directly from the United States, but we do know that Slovakia is sending over 12 MiG-29s, and the Bulgarians are also sending over around a quarter century, which means about 25 of them in, fancy terms, of Su-25s to Ukraine. So we do know that there's around 30-something aircraft being sent over, but the United States will never be sending over any of their own as of what we know right now. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a question from Railroad22, who says, what is a junk drone?
A junk drone?
Yes.
I wouldn't know that specific term to actually answer that one, sadly. I haven't heard that term myself. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question in a way, at least my ignorance of that term. And I'm sorry I do not know what that is. It may be out there, it may be something that's heavily used, but sadly, I've never heard about that on stream. And so with that, we're going to answer 2 more questions, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream.
And up next, we have a question from Sitton and Thinkin, who says, Enforcer, Russia jumping off from western Belarus to interdict the supply of Western weapons. If they do, will the West intercede?
I don't believe the West would interfere as long as the war did not spill over into Poland. If the war didn't spill over into Poland, there's really nothing that they can do, because then it would look like we are getting involved against their own words. We said if they use chemical, biological, or nuclear, the United States would step in, and if they attack a NATO country, that would invoke Article 5, which we would then step into the war directly and pretty much be fighting an entirely separate one at that point. So I hope that kind of answers the question, and the answer to that would be if the Russians started to move west, as long as they didn't spill over into Poland, there's really nothing the West would do as far as we know, officially right now. And so with that, we are now on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person who put in a question?
All right, and that viewer is Joel's310, who says, Enforcer, have you heard about Russia's summit with Iran to receive Iranian drones as well as training? Turkey is also supposed to be involved somehow, but Iran is known as a major producer of drones.
We have heard about that. We didn't include it on the news, but it is something going on in the background right now. And so we will probably cover that within the next day or two once we get some hardcore information or video evidence that the Russians have them or the Iranians are sending them over. But we really didn't have a lot of video evidence today to confirm this beyond just the statements, which, usually on political things like that, I usually take statements for their word, but on this one, I'm just wanting to make sure to give it a little bit of leeway just before I report on it just yet. So, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, I saw that we had one last super chat come in from Ann Nax, spelled N-A-K-S, who says, no question, just Slava Ukraini, Herom Slava. And so I thank you so much for the support, Ann, and I hope you enjoyed that extra Herom Slava I did in the Zelenskyy voice, because I don't know if that was really good or not. But anyways, with that, I thank you all so much for your support tonight. I hope I answered the questions pretty well. Of course, I'm the heavyweight champion of the world, the best there ever was. And so, thank you all so much for watching once again. It means a lot to me. And also, of course, it means a lot to Matthew as well. I hope you found the news incredibly educational tonight. Of course, kiss the pigeons. And we'll see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you all so much once again for watching. And I hope y'all have a great night. Good night, everyone. And take care. And I'll see you tomorrow for day 140 of the news. See you around.